good things of today, for people whose friendship we value, for work well done, for deadlines met, for home and for shelter, for food shared. May the darkness of tonight take with it the bitterness of today. May sunset put to rest any anger, and the starlight be a reminder that your forgiveness never fails. For our failure in your service this day, we ask forgiveness. We see now that you are present to us this day, in the love of those we meet, in the call to sympathise and console, in the cries of those poorer than us, those who have no friends, no food, no home, no shelter. We remember them now, Lord, in your presence. May our loving God, who told us not to be anxious or afraid, but to build his kingdom and lay our burdens on him, bless us and give us rest. Guide all the actions and deliberations of this council this day. Send your blessings upon the people of our borough, and help us all to keep in mind that all we do should be in service of you and one another. Amen. Amen.
Good evening everyone, and welcome to our guests in the public gallery. Just a few formal things before we start the meeting proper. Before starting the meeting, could I ask that all members ensure that mobile phones are switched off or to silent, please? Could I also remind everyone, and particularly members of the public present, that this meeting is being streamed as usual this evening. This means that the cameras may capture your image, and by your presence here, you are deemed to be consenting to being filmed and to the use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting. Item 1, declarations of interest. Does any member of the council wish to declare any relevant interest which he or she has in any item or issue before this council meeting? General advice on the declaration of interest has been placed on each councillor's lectern. Members declaring an interest are asked to indicate the subject matter of the declared interest, the minute number and the page number to which the declaration relates, if relevant, whether the interest is of a personal, prejudicial or a disclosable pecuniary interest. I would ask members also to give written notice of any interest declared on the form which is in front of each member tonight and hand it to an officer from Democratic Services. Item 2, minutes. Yes, so I do beg your pardon, of course.
Yes,
not giving you time to do it, was I?
You didn't,
Thank you,
right.
Councillor Harris.
Thank you. Yes, I'm a member of Bury Folk. I've filled out the form.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Relating to question number 3, I'm an NHS employee. It's a personal interest.
Thank you. Councillor Walker.
With reference to the motion on Bury Football Club, I declare a pecuniary interest.
Thank you.
And I will give details to the solicitor during the meeting. I'll write it out.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you.
Councillor Quinn.
Thanks, Chair. Anything about the NHS? My son's a consultant, my daughter-in-law's a GP, and there's a question about Brexit. My daughter works with the government in Geneva.
Thank you. Councillor Hussain. Did you... Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you were on your feet. Any others? Councillor...
Mr Mayor, personal interest in any debate we get relating to Bury Football Club. I'm a member of Forever Bury.
Thank you. Councillor Wright.
Mr Mayor, personal interest, wife works for the Lorraine Primary School.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay.
Likewise, personal, I'm a member of Forever Bury.
Thank you. Councillor Morris.
Thank you. Personal interest in public transport. My partner works for TFGM.
Thank you. Any others? Okay, if not, thank you. We really can go on to item 2, which is minutes. Is it your wish that the minutes of the meeting of the council held on the 10th of July 2019 be signed as a true and correct record? Thank you. Item 3 is mayoral communications and announcements. I would like to start by welcoming Councillor Mike Smith to his first meeting. Well, congratulations and welcome, Councillor. I'm sad to report on the recent death of former Ramsbottom councillor Diana Ashworth. Sadly, members will also be aware of the recent death of Church Ward councillor Susan Nuttall. Susan served this council with distinction since 2012, I think, and her dedication was well respected across this chamber. Our thoughts are with David and the family at this sad time. Susan Nuttall was well respected, a fine councillor and a nice, decent person. She will be sadly missed. I know one or two members want to say a few words, and the first one will be Councillor Walker.
I've typed out what I'm saying so I don't ramble on too emotionally for too long. Mr. Mayor, colleagues, officers and members of the public present this evening, it's my privilege to say a few words, a mark of respect for my ward colleague, Councillor Susan Nuttall, who I persuaded to stand in our ward at the time. She died quite suddenly just a few days ago on the 3rd of September. This is obviously a sad occasion for me. In the past, I've been asked to give eulogies in church for former colleagues who are no longer serving as councillors but had been mayors and been on many years, and they were older than myself. But this is the first time I've spoken about a serving councillor who was only re-elected last year and was much, much younger than myself. It's quite upsetting, to say the least. First, our sympathies must go to her husband David and to her parents who still live. Sue supported her husband when he was parliamentary candidate and when he became MP for Bury North. In victories and defeats, she was by his side. Her loyalty and commitment to David could not be questioned. If I may say, on a lighter note, she had to stoically sit there when people were having a go at him in full council meetings, and it upset her, but she never showed it, and she just sat there and took it. I wouldn't like my wife to be attacked by councillors opposite at any time. She was not, though, just David's wife and friend. She fulfilled many roles in her own right. She was a graduate in foreign languages at Sheffield University. She worked as a solicitor in professional life. She served as a councillor on Rotherham Borough Council before moving back over to the northwest side of the Pennines. Sue was a true Lancashire lass, as the saying goes. She was from Blackburn, and in her younger days she competed as a long-distance runner at county levels representing Lancashire. She was a committed churchgoer, serving as church warden at St Anne's, the parish church of Tottington, where they both lived. She also put a lot of time into a number of local charities, including being secretary for quite a number of years of the Blind Society in Bury. She was involved with other charities as well. She was school governor, latterly Lowcroft Primary School in our ward. While supporting David, Sue was also politically active in her own right, not just as a councillor in our ward, where she won 3 times, but as a party activist at constituency level. For many years, she chaired the Bury North Constituency Ladies. That wasn't just an honorary title, she was a very hands-on person. She'd take money on the door, she'd wash up the pots afterwards. She was thoroughly involved for some years, quite a number of years. She organised social events which raised funds, and as we know in all parties, if you want to print leaflets and do other things, you need the money, and our ladies have always raised a fair proportion of the money we have. She would then go out delivering those leaflets she'd helped to fund, and she could compare favourably with anyone in terms of speed and numbers delivered. She was very fit and active until a few months ago. It was therefore distressing to see the effects of Sue's recent illness. I think we all saw those. But even so, the end, when it came suddenly, was a shock, and it wasn't with all the illnesses that she'd been suffering recently. We can only hope now that she will rest in peace. Requiesce in pace. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Councillor Jones, you'd indicated you may say a word later in your speech. Is there anyone else who would like to say anything? If not, could I invite you to stand for a minute's silence, please? I wonder if I could ask if anyone has lost a small black purse. We found a purse outside on the balcony bar. To claim it, you would have to give the serial notes of all the notes that are in it, or the dates of the coins, but quite seriously, there is a small, and there seems to be some change in it. So if you've lost a small, Jill has it, it's in safekeeping. So next is public question time. A period up to 30 minutes is set aside for questions from members of the public. There have been 2 questions received in advance of the meeting. I call on Carol Birchmore to ask question 1 relating to GMSF. Ms Birchmore, please. Yeah.
At a recent meeting with members of Bury Planning Department, I asked why they were proposing to release enough greenbelt to build 2,920 more houses than Bury Council was required to do as part of the GMSF.
I was told that the extra release of greenbelt was for the period after the GMSF, when additional houses would be required. Since the council themselves acknowledge that once the greenbelt is released, they have no way of insisting on a brownfield first policy, I am concerned that this will mean at the end of the GMSF period, Bury will end up with 2,920 more houses than are required built on greenbelt. I was told by the planning department that the information about the planned over-release was freely available in the public domain. I have to ask, therefore, why more councillors are not challenging these figures and why it appears that the council is intent on allowing more houses to be built on greenbelt than is required.
Councillor Jones, I believe, will answer the question.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Ms Birchmore, for your question. The government's housing targets for Bury was over 11,000 homes, but this target has been reduced now to 9,500 with the second draft of the GMSF. This has allowed a significant amount of greenbelt land to be protected, and in Bury there was an overall reduction of 40% of greenbelt land saved in the second draft. The fact that we simply do not have enough brownfield land in the borough to meet even this reduced target, and is therefore means that difficult decisions need to be made around the release of greenbelt land. Now, this is not just unique to Bury, this is common right across the country in order for government's housing targets to be met. The targets could be met by releasing dozens of smaller greenbelt sites, but these would not be big enough to secure any of the necessary infrastructure that is needed to accommodate new development. So our cars would be using the same roads, our children would be going to the same schools. There would be an exasperated capacity issues that we have all around our social infrastructure today. Instead, the strategy we are proposing is to release large strategic sites that are of a size that they are able to provide some real and tangible infrastructure benefits. That will not only mitigate for the new development, but will also help to alleviate the existing pressures on our roads and elsewhere. The proposals in Bury will help to deliver new roads, junction improvements, additional public transport capacity and new schools and health facilities. The proposals will also open up much of the Greenbelt to the public, thereby providing a range of recreational facilities, from new cycle routes to country parks. However, in order to secure these benefits, proposals need to be of a size that will ensure that the package of new infrastructure measures are viable and deliverable. Whilst this does mean that on the larger sites, development will not come forward until after the plan period, the land needs to be identified for development at this stage to provide the certainty needed to secure the investment for major infrastructure provision. Without this certainty, the major infrastructure interventions could not be delivered.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Ms Birchmore, the way it goes is, because you submitted your question writing, you're entitled to a supplementary.
Okay, well, with all due respect, you didn't answer the question. You are planning to release 2,920 more sites for from Greenbelt than are required by the GMSF. That means that because you cannot, and you have admitted this, you cannot impose a brownfield first policy. It is not legal, you can't do it. That means that at the end of the GMSF, we will end up with 2,920 more houses built than we need to have. Is that a fair assumption?
Thank you. I'll get Councillor Jones to answer that. Councillor Jones.
Thank you for the supplementary. I'm not sure that your figures are correct. I mean, I bow to your judgment, obviously. I've been provided with figures, you've been provided with figures, and we could bandy them around all evening. The point of the matter is that the second draft of the GMSF has produced a reduced number of properties in Bury for us and increased the availability of Greenbelt land. That is yet to go out to consultation in due course. That's the position we're at today. I don't think I can help you any further with your assertion on the housing numbers.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Second question is from Ms Haydock. Nicole, I can't call you Ms Haydock, I've known you for 40 years or so. So your question, please.
Yes, I've got my Friends of Dumas Lane hat on today. Given that there is no proper adult education services provision in Ratcliffe, as opposed to Prestwich, Ramsbottom, Bury, can you explain, please, why Bury Education Services Management has so far failed to consider positively repeated requests from Friends of Dumas Lane to include Dumas Lane Community Centre as a regular venue for their courses in all their brochures? And by brochures, I mean this.
Thank you, Councillor Jones.
Adult learning brochures are only produced twice a year. The planning for the autumn brochure starts in March for publication in July. The spring-summer brochure is planned in October and November for publication in December. Brochures are one method we use to promote courses, along with the use of social media. We use Spotted Ratcliffe, for example, which we understand is well used by the local community. Bury Adult Learning Service website, the Bury Times, posters and leaflets are all part of that process, including Twitter and Facebook. These methods are more flexible and responsive to the development of provision in communities, as this happens all the year round and does not necessarily fit into the production of the period of the publication of the brochures. We have, however, included Dumas Lane on the back of our course guide as a partner along with organisations we currently work with across Bury. Partnership working is growing with groups across Ratcliffe, including Dumas Lane, and we have delivered taster sessions in the centre to help promote learning. We want to build on the partnership to develop provision with a view to including courses in our spring, summer, autumn, winter brochures where appropriate. which means that we would need to have plans in place of the intended offer by the end of October. This does not exclude the development of courses throughout the year as information regarding community learning needs are identified. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Nicole, same applies. You're entitled to a supplementary.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, we have cooperated with the Adult Education Services to try and get some courses in the centre. The point I'm trying to make is that they are making very little effort themselves to actually promote these courses, leaving it all to volunteers like ourselves. So do you think it's right, given their resources, that A, they do not publish the centre on their brochure, which we have requested 3 times before publication, and B, why do they rely on volunteers? They've got the money, they've got the staff. Why rely on Facebook? We do Facebook as well, and we publicise these courses too. They bring nobody to the centre, not a single person. They make no effort whatsoever.
Thank you, Nicole. Councillor Jones.
I hear what you say, Ms Haydock, but I'm advised that the Adult Learning Service staff have attended the centre and met committee members at Dumas Lane. They have been in dialogue with them. Now, on your specific point about lack of publication in the Reignite document, I'm more than happy to pursue that for you, because I think it's quite a simple thing to achieve. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. In accordance with the Council procedure rules, I now invite questions from any members of the public present. Therefore, if any member of the public wishes to ask a question, please indicate and a microphone will be handed to you. Please state your name. No supplementary questions are allowed, I'm afraid. And thank both the answers to the first 2 questions. Thank you for playing the game. You didn't make long speeches. You got to your questions. I thank you for that. I'd ask all of the members to do the same, please. Any questions?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Stephen Cluer, Secretary, Friends of Bury Folk. My question is for newly appointed Council Leader, David Jones. With the Greater Manchester Spatial Framework now on hold until after the next elections, Bury urgently need an up-to-date local plan based on the latest available data, and as stakeholders, we would be willing to help you with this. In your new role, will you be taking a fresh approach to redesigning and submitting a local plan that is fit for purpose and in accordance with our community needs, unlike your predecessor's version, which simply followed the agenda of Greater Manchester Council Authority's housing plans and which failed to protect Bury's Greenbelt?
Thank you, sir. Councillor Jones.
Mr Cluer, thank you for your question. If I can correct the first part, I don't think a decision has been taken yet to defer the GMSF. It's still there, it's still a live process. That's the position as I stand here this evening. This is something that will be considered later this month at the Combined Authority. On your second point, I would agree entirely with the sentiments that we need to get a plan in place as soon as possible. If we don't, this increases the threat of planning applications being submitted across the borough, potentially resulting in costly planning appeals. It's in our interest, it's in your interest as a resident for us to have a plan in Bury. Nobody wants this, but in order to get a plan in place, we need to be able to demonstrate that the plan provides for jobs, homes and infrastructure in our growing communities. That is what the key test will be when the government-appointed planning inspectors look at the plan, and that is what the GMSF plan gave us. Importantly, working with our Greater Manchester neighbours through the GMSF actually helps to reduce the impact on the borough's green belt, as we have been able to offset some of our housing needs elsewhere in the conurbation. That amounts to nearly 2,000. However, in order to secure these benefits, proposals need to be of a size that will ensure that the package of the new infrastructure measures are viable and deliverable. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Any further questions?
Andy Hay from Prestwich. Can the council please explain why, following the Carter affair, the council solicitor has been able to keep her job when both the ex-chief executive and ex-director of children's services lost theirs. If the leader wants, I have handed my details to the member of Democratic Services in the gallery, and he's more than happy to write to
stop you mid-sentence, but one or two of the members are uneasy on all sides of the chamber with this question. Now, we have consulted the council solicitor. We haven't, apparently. I'm not sure it's in order. Certainly Councillor Daly doesn't think it is, and Councillor Jones
Can I just make a point?
Not yet, till I finish speaking. I'm going to rule that question out of order. It will not be answered. I thought we checked it out, but it's not a proper question, and that's the end of the debate. No more questions on that of that nature.
Friends of Bury Folk. Our group of almost 7,000 concerned residents and growing has received some answers, not always satisfactorily, to many freedom of information requests submitted, but with several still outstanding. This appears due to the council solicitor preventing the council members from responding to genuine inquiries and requests for, amongst other things, the minutes of the meeting held by the council members to determine the initial allocations in the GMSF and the evidence it was based upon. Surely, during a consultation period is the best time to hold such discussions, so why are the minutes and other responses being withheld? We believe, as citizens of this borough, we have a right to this information. Will our new council leader please look into these requests and bring some trust in the council back to the people of Bury on this subject?
Thank you, Mr. Russell. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. I mean, it's the first I've known about it. I will certainly look into it for you and come back to you with an answer.
Thank you.
My name is Mohammed, and I'm here today to represent Private Hire Taxi Driver Association from Bury. Our members provide excellent taxi service to community all year round, from cheap as £1.70 to all year round with no extra cost. However, from last 5 years, taxi drivers keep demanding independent MOT station, and they raise their very serious concerns. But licensing department completely failed to understand or provide the services to the paid customer. Last 5 years, drivers paid around £1.9 million in the shape of fees. And our demand was independent MOT station, better value for our hard-earned money, but we haven't got there. My question is, if Bury Council got a £525,000 available as a capital investment in Prestwich, they can buy takeaway. What about us? We paid for the services, and we demand independent MOT stations, and it's not been addressed. So years and years and years and gone by, and we still having the same demands: independent MOT station, better services for our value, hard-earned money, and driver concern should be addressed rather than passing on to each other. There's a scenario here, driver think there was us versus them, and this kind of environment is not good for healthy environment of the business. There is 1,000 families totally dependent on the drivers.
Sir, if you would get to your question. There are other
Sir, my question is why we are not getting independent MOT station. We paid £1.9 million for the last 5 years. Why? What is the reason why we are not getting it? We are not happy as a customer from the Bradley Fold. Bradley Fold got a fire. They moved to Bolton, and we don't know exactly when they're going to come back. Why we pay?
Thank you, sir. We've got the question. Thank you. Yeah.
Mohammed, many of your colleagues will recognise me as the previous chair of the licensing committee, and of course I'm familiar with the pressures on your service, and I'd say at the outset that each and every one of you as a taxi driver in this borough is valued and appreciated. That's the starting point. Yeah? Moving on from that, the fire at Bradley Fold was an unfortunate accident. We were able to put things in place very, very quickly to reduce the inconvenience to you and your colleagues by travelling to Bolton. It was only a couple of miles. It wasn't as though they were asking you to go to Rochdale or somewhere else. It was to Bolton. In the longer term, by the end of this year, we hope to have a facility back up and running at Bradley Fold. Now, longer term, there's a different issue about the existence of a testing centre run by the council. And we accept that you're not comfortable with that. But I've said before to you and your colleagues that that ensures minimum standards. Having one testing station and with no interest in the repairs, we can be truly considered to be an independent testing station. That's been the position of the council, but it will be reviewed in the near future as and when the new facility comes back online.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Sorry, no supplementary, sir. Sorry.
Naveed Ijaz from Private Hire Drivers Association in Bury. There's a proposal for clean air policy in place at the moment within Greater Manchester. My question is that in past 5 years, 1.9 million has been paid, has been contributed by the drivers towards the council. What will be the contribution of the council towards the drivers to help them to switch over to the eco-friendly or environmental-friendly vehicles? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Straight to the point. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a fair question, actually, and it's one that we've been asking central government for an answer for. We don't expect you or any of your colleagues to be unfairly penalised by this clean air policy. That's our position. That's how we would want to move it forward. And I have to say that initially we were given some hope that there would be some financial incentives presented to all the 10 authorities in Manchester in order to implement this strategy. That has really dried up, so we're now back revisiting it to see where we go with it. So again, we're at one with you. It's not for the council to impose it because it is a Greater Manchester strategy. So we would all be looking at funding from central government in order to implement the plan.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Hi, my name's Nick Smith, representing market traders on Bury Market. Is the leader of the council, Dave Jones, aware of the recent meeting of a market trader with the chief executive, Jeff Little, regarding a request for serious reconsideration for rent reductions for Bury Market?
Mr. Smith. Councillor Jones.
I was present at a meeting when many when many market traders came into the town hall and we had some conversations. If you've had a meeting last week, then I'm not aware of it. Although I've just been nodded by the chief executive that he has accepted that you did meet last week. I'm not aware of the content of those discussions, I'm afraid. But again, I can come back to you. If you can leave your details with the clerk, I can update you on what the outcome of that meeting was. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name is Sam. I live in Churchward. This question to the Leader of the Council. Given the climate crisis and the urgent need to meet net zero carbon emissions, is it right that the Council should plan, well, sorry, not should plan, but the Council should say no to building any future petrol stations in the borough?
Thank you, sir. Again, straight to the point. Yeah.
I'm not sure that as an authority we've got that, it's within our gift to make that decision. There are many things that are left to our planning authority, and we have to respect their semi-judicial responsibilities. So to make a blanket diktat, if you like, that we're having no more petrol stations, I think would be pushing that one a little bit too far. But I understand where you're coming from, Mr. Turner. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. My name is Shyam Raju, sir. I'm from the National Private Hire Association. Talking about clean air, which is a very sensitive issue, sir, for Greater Manchester, because it's going to put a lot of taxi drivers out of business. And the council here, across 10 councils, they need to look into it because the taxi drivers have been penalised because of these congestion charges. They tried it 8 years ago, it's not worked, and they try to bring it in from a different angle. But anyway, my question is, sir, I am aware of that the £28 million which the Greater Manchester Council was applying for has been refused, it's on hold, everything now. So, plus the licensing department, Mr. Tyre, and yourselves here, you need to get your figures right, sir, because 32 million jobs which is done by the private hire trade in Hackney Carriage in Greater Manchester, which is wrong figure, sir, is between 115 to 125 million. That's how many jobs we do, sir. You need to look into it. If you would have got the grant, and that divided by 10 councils, it's not enough, sir. So it's very important that you look into this matter.
Thank you, sir. Councillor Jones.
I've heard what you said, Mr. Raja, and I don't disagree with the word that you've said. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Sir, my name is Adil. I am Chairman Bury Taxi Driver Association. My question is, anything Bury Council is thinking about the safety of drivers? Because these days, I think you hear the news about the taxi driver. This is going on for last many years, stabbing of taxi drivers, people are paying, throwing stones, smashing their windows. So everything is for customers, not for taxi drivers. Please look into the matter. This is my question. Safety of taxi drivers on behalf of the council, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jones.
Again, you know, I'm in agreement. Your safety is important, as is everybody's. Fair paying public. We have a responsibility to them, as you do. We have a responsibility to you. And I'm as concerned about your safety as anybody else is in the borough. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? No, or if not, okay. Thank you very much. You all kept to the questions. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Next item is recommendation of Cabinet and Council committees. Meeting of the Human Resource and Appeals Panel held on the 16th of July 2019. Approval of applications for voluntary early retirement with severance. I really just want to give a little bit of a note here. I don't think it will be at all controversial. The advice from the council is that members should refrain from naming the individuals to which the applications apply. So I hope you'll remember that in any debate that ensues. Councillor Black. When you in your own good time, Councillor Black.
I think the main thing is that the details are in the report, but I think it might be worth just making a few comments. Members know that this council has been forced to make cuts of 100 million since 2010 and more cuts to follow. To help to get to those savings, staff were offered a voluntary exit scheme in May with terms broadly comparable to redundancy, comprising a lump sum severance payment and for staff aged 55 and over access to their pension. These are contractual terms. Anyone aged 55 or above who is made compulsorily redundant gets their unabated pension access and a lump sum payment under national terms and conditions. And this is set out in the report in paragraphs 2, 4 and 5. This is a one-off exercise. 67 applications were agreed under this scheme, which will save 1.9 million a year in costs going forward, even once one-off exit costs of 900,000 have been covered. For 2 people out of the 67, the total amount of their severance package exceeded 100,000, which means their application has to come to this council meeting. Much of this relates to their pensions, which, like many people here, they have paid into over many years. These 2 individuals, and I have to stress this, were offered the same terms as the other 65. Both posts are now redundant due to a council-wide restructure exercise to balance the budget. As the report shows, the revenue cost to the council is only 30,000 for each of them. The pension costs are met by an allocation from the capital funds. A voluntary scheme was preferable to compulsory redundancies, and in any case would have resulted in the same costs. The reduction in senior management posts will save us, therefore, nearly £2 million a year, and further savings in senior management posts are scheduled to follow.
Thank you. To be seconded by Councillor Jones. David Jones.
Happy to second, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Are there any comments or questions? Councillor Jones.
Thank you,
Nick
Mr.
Jones.
Only a quick one, just following the final words of Councillor Black, because at the start you said this is a one-off exercise, but then you said there will be further savings to senior officers later. So is this going to happen again?
Yes. Yeah. The invitation for 6, you were saying 6, I could see 67, a lot of people. That exercise is a one-off exercise in terms of voluntary severance. And like any organisation, restructure plans can actually take place, and we are, as you know, required to make further cuts. But that would not be subject to these generous terms. It would be a different exercise altogether.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Daly.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. I think it's important to put on public record that the cost to the taxpayer regarding these two officers is over £330,000. I sat on this panel and voted against this recommendation as I didn't see how such sums could be possibly justifiable in the circumstances. Could we have some more detail, Mr Mayor, please, regarding how these sums are worked out? Whether the posts in question are going to be absorbed by other existing members of staff, or whether the post will be replaced by new officers in the future. And following on from what my colleague has said, are we to expect more payments of this size going forward in terms of redundancy exercises?
Thank you, Councillor Daly. Councillor Black.
I guess all I'd want to do is to reiterate that these payments are contractual obligations, and that everyone who was affected by that exercise was treated in the same way. You can't have it both ways. You criticise us when cuts are difficult to achieve, yet you take issue when we try to make them. I will repeat what the report says. These costs will be offset. Please don't laugh at me, because you always do that and it annoys me. These costs will be offset by long-term savings going forward. They are not perks, they are not payouts, they are contractual entitlements. But perhaps it's difficult for a party that has neglected, I can't think of what the Tories have ever done on workers' rights, a party that has systematically frozen pay awards and seeks to dismantle workers' rights, to understand this.
Thank you, Councillor Black. Any other questions or comments? You are quite entitled to comment on what Councillor Black just said. Don't sit there seething, Councillor Harris.
I actually object to talking about national policy here, but it is my understanding that the minimum wage has been increased by this present government.
And yes, and introduced by a Labour government. Do you want to turn your mic off? All I want to say is these. I'm repeating myself. These, these are savings that we are required to make. They have been carried out under national contractual conditions. They are not perks. They are not payouts. They are what people are entitled to. The revenue cost to the council is approximately just over 30,000 per post. They will be these cuts will be largely offset. The expense now this year will be largely offset going forward every year with savings.
Thank you, Councillor Black. Any other comments or questions? Yes.
Savings. Sorry, Councillor Black. Savings from where?
Okay.
We are required to make funding cuts. We are making funding cuts in this way. Therefore, there will be savings in council budgets because those posts will no longer be part of the establishment.
Could I ask Councillor Walker first, Councillor Jones? Yeah.
Black has read history. I don't know if she'll tell me next she's got a degree in it, but and read social history, the 19th century, workers' rights, and what Conservative governments did for trade union rights, other workers' rights. No, she said the Conservatives would understand because they've never done anything to support workers, pensions, social services, through not only 19th century, right up to the present day. We have supported workers. You know, read a bit of Disraeli. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Councillor Nick Jones, you wanted to come back on something.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Only quickly. We've just heard that obviously the council has to make all these cuts. Yeah, okay. So as you've made all these cuts at the low management and things, and as we've seen in some senior management, can we have assurance, as we've seen in the last 12 months, there's been an unbelievable amount of senior management employed? Is there going to be no more senior management posts created? Because as you're making savings, as quickly as you make savings, you create a post, at some unbelievable salary over 100,000, which ruins the saving. I don't understand the
I think we
logic.
get the gist of the question, Councillor, and Councillor Black will answer it.
This organisation has to continue to deliver efficiently, competently, with leadership. The overall cost envelope for the council is reducing significantly, as you're well aware, because it's your party that's made us do that. There will continue to be management positions. The overall cost envelope for the council will be lower.
I'm going to move on because there are some gentlemen up in the public gallery who are waiting for a notice of motion later on in the agenda. You wanted to ask someone else, Councillor Day, and it will be the last one.
Sorry, I don't want to ask. No.
Yeah, you can. That's comments or questions. Are there any amendments or other motions on this item? No. Okay. All those in favour of the motion, please show. Against? It is carried, I believe. Make a comment, Councillor Daly.
I'm terribly sorry, Mr. Mayor. It's just in terms of the people who are in the public gallery. It's just to bring to your attention, and I'm completely in the hands of yourself, Mr. Mayor, regarding the motion that involves a lot of interest, I think, for the people in the public gallery, is last on the agenda and potentially is to be heard on the basis of previous council meetings at approximately 10 o'clock. So I just wanted to bring to your attention that perhaps there may be a way of bringing it forward in the agenda. So I just make that point now.
I'm sympathetic to that, but I'm conscious also that Liberal Democrats kind of missed out last time round. Councillor Pixton, would you have any objections to... It's my decision, I'm asking you to make it, I'm just asking how you feel about it.
I mean, one possibility, Mr. Mayor, would be to do motions before questions, would be another way of doing it. Because I think, to be honest, all three issues that were debated tonight, because the football club is a very important issue as well as conductors on trams, so I think they should all have a good airing.
Okay.
My personal view.
Well, let's not complicate it then. We'll stick to the agenda as it is. I'm sure the gentleman will show patience and stick with it. So the last motion was carried. We're now on the leader's statement. You were suggesting we do it before the leader's statement, really? Councillor Pixton. I don't know. Councillor, do you think?
I'm indifferent, Mr. Mayor.
So am I, to be honest. Does it matter?
I'm happy to go with...
Right. I'm told it's up to me, and I do take the point that the gentlemen there are waiting, but we'll keep to the order that the notice of motion were, so it would be first the Liberal Democrat one. So we'll move to notices of motion, and then we'll go back on the agenda, if everybody's okay with that. You understand what's happening, gentlemen? We're going to try and bring the notice of motion forward. We skip in for the time being some of the business, and then we're going back to it. So the first, let me skip then to notice of motion. It is, the first one is from the notice of motion is to do with trams as have been received from councillors listed in the council summons. The detailed motion are set out in the summons. I call on Councillor Powell to move the motion. Councillor Powell.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. The Liberal Democrat motion this evening concerns some of the recent issues highlighted with the Metrolink tram service and why we believe having conductors on all tram journeys would be a simple, cost-effective solution to two serious and quite long-standing problems. So firstly, we believe the presence of conductors would help improve safety amongst passengers. I'm sure all members here are very aware of the recent spike in antisocial behaviour and violence on Metrolink services across the network over recent years. An answer given to us at the last full council meeting showed that there were 3,481 incidents in the last 12-month period. And between April and June 2019, there were 946 incidents, which is approximately 8% higher than at the same point last year. We believe these increases and some other quite high-profile incidents recently have contributed to many members of the community sometimes feeling a little bit unsafe when using the tram, and I think this is particularly the case during evening services. In fact, a crime survey which was conducted by the Lib Dems in Prestwich earlier this year actually found that 62% of respondents were worried and actually concerned for their safety whilst travelling on the Metrolink. We do believe that the presence of conductors and onboard staff would provide a visible onboard presence which would hope to reduce antisocial behaviour, and it would also provide, I suppose, an immediate reference point. So if there are any issues that passengers are concerned about, they have somebody that they can go to straight away, and hopefully that can be dealt with immediately rather than retrospectively. So that's the first issue around safety. The second issue, which we believe conductors on trams would help to address, is again another one which is quite topical, and that's the high levels of fare evasion on Metrolink services. So Transport for Greater Manchester's own response to a question in this council chamber revealed that currently as many as 1 in 8 journeys across the service are being unpaid for. And last summer, more than 4,500 fines were issued by Metrolink in August alone, August 2018. It is our belief that law-abiding citizens, passengers who always buy tickets when using the service, do expect to see regular inspections taking place to ensure that other passengers who should be paying for tickets are paying for tickets. And we do think that having on-board staff such as conductors would make it easier for checks to take place, and this would also make it easier to collect any outstanding fares from new passengers joining the trams. And it would also help to reduce the large amount of lost revenue which is currently being essentially squandered as a result of these high levels of fare evasion. So those are the two kind of main issues and sub-issues, if you like, that we think conductors might be able to address. Members are probably wondering, are there any good examples that are currently being used of conductors that we can refer to? And the answer is yes. So one would be the Supertram in Sheffield, and also the Wolverhampton and Birmingham tram service, which operates in the West Midlands. So these are currently utilising onboard staff on all journeys, actually, not just selectively, on all journeys within their network. And they are currently reaping some of the benefits that I've just outlined. And in addition to this, I suppose, is also the benefit that the presence of conductors has made it easier to provide instant advice and assistance to all passengers, but particularly, I suppose, the more vulnerable passengers, such as the elderly and those with disabilities, who might require that extra level of assistance. We do believe that this proposal is completely affordable. So last year, ticket revenue from Metrolink was actually £72 million. So if conductors on trams was to serve to halve ticket evasion from its current level at 1 in 8 journeys to, let's say, 1 in 16, that would provide around £5 million extra in ticket revenue, which would pay for something in the region of 130 conductors. I do hope that members from all sides of the chamber can support this motion, and we do hope that the Manchester-Bury line on the network can be used as a trial for onboard conductors, as we hope to address some of these, like I said earlier, some of these really long-standing issues, and hopefully that will help to improve passenger service and passenger satisfaction throughout the network. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Well done. Councillor Pickstone to second.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I could second the motion but reserve my right to speak.
Are there any comments? Yes. Councillor? Yep. Councillor Smith.
Well, thank you for the welcome you gave me, first of all, and it's a pleasure to be here. I'd like to offer my support to this motion. In my ward of Ratcliffe West in particular, there have been numerous reports of assaults and intimidation both on the tram system and around the stations supporting the network. As a public transport system, the Metrolink needs to command the support of the public at large, and as such, the reassuring presence of a conductor on the tram system would be welcome, I'm sure, for many. Safety for the most vulnerable amongst us should be a priority, both for the Metrolink and the members of this chamber. Most of our young or elderly residents use this system as a lifeline to travel around the borough, and the perceived lack of security will be off-putting for many. A trial to evaluate the effectiveness in driving up revenue collection and improving security should act as a reassuring gesture to Metrolink users. And the Council's own estimate, 12.5% of journeys are made without payment. Such a move surely may be self-funding and may even improve bottom-line profit margins on the network. I think this is a win-win situation for all involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. First speech in the Council Chamber. Well done. Councillor Gunther.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't think any right-minded person could really argue against this motion. I use the Metro on a regular basis. For many years, I used the basis to travel to and from work in Manchester. And whilst perhaps I'm lucky, I've never been subject to or witnessed any violence. I mean, I'm really not disputing that it takes place. But I've certainly worked with one young gentleman who never paid his fare. Never. On the basis that, and this is some years ago, and this is absolutely true what I'm retelling, on the basis that even when he got fined, it was still cheaper than paying his fare all the time. That is actually stealing. I don't think he would have recognised it as stealing, but that's what it is. So I don't think any right-minded person could possibly vote against this motion. None.
Councillor Harris.
I do agree with what's been said, and I personally do like to actually see a regular person. I hate going to supermarkets when there's a machine. So yes, it's a good idea to have a conductor. There's only just one thing. Sorry, on many occasions I have to travel on the Metro at rush hour, and if anybody has had that experience, I've let trams go because you are literally like that, and I'm not sure how effective. It's just an observation. A single person, they couldn't actually move round the tram. So it's good in principle, it's good in theory. There certainly are some practical considerations which must be taken into account. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Quinn.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, as a group, we're happy to support this in principle. However, I mean, I have been talking to Metrolink, Mr. Mayor, and they are going to put 50 more. There's going to be 50 actual police constables on the tram system. Councillor Gunter talked about it's cheaper to travel. Well, last time I was on the bench, and I've not been on for a long while. I think the fines were £275. Again, you've got to enforce that. You've got to find them and enforce it, but fines are quite steep. Now, what we have talked about, I know that, and Councillor Harris does raise a good point, that if the trams are full, then the guards can't get down, and that has been the experience in Birmingham. On Nottingham, the guards have been withdrawn, and if you're talking about a guard on each tram for the full duration of, from morning till late at night, then you're talking about 400 guards. Now, I know guards are reassuring, and we have seen incidents of antisocial behaviour on the tram, and I think there's about 41 million tram journeys a year, so it is small. However, there has to be a cost to that. So if you're going to pay for 400 people, there has to be a cost. And talking to Metrolink, they don't think that cost would get that cost back in fare evasion. So, while we're going to support it, it may be that when we pass that Metrolink do come and say, if you're going to have this, then the money's got to come from somewhere. And if we're not going to get it back in fare evasion, then that could be in higher fares or going to the combined authority asking for more money, which you might not get. So, yeah, we do support it, but it's not quite, I think, as simple as it's been said. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Walker.
Just a few points, because we've all seemed to be agreeing we're going to support it, so there's no point filibustering or anything. But I was intrigued by Sheffield. Anybody mentioned Sheffield? It's my hometown. And their super tram is different design to our Metrolink. They're bigger, wider, and they double up, and the tram conductor can get right through the tram. And they're a bit more spacious, apart from if they're coming away from Hillsborough anyway. They are more spacious. Now, It's fewer routes than Greater Manchester, so there's less cost. But I agree there. I like to see a tram conductor on. I'd like to see a bus conductor on every bus. You know, on the 98, the 471, controlling misbehaviour and so on, and checking tickets more regularly. But that's harking back to the 40s and 50s, so it's not going to come back. But I think the point is Supertram, very different, fewer routes, and different design of trams. We have these narrow trams, which do get full at certain times, and it's hard to get through them. But also we have doubles, say Bury to Altrincham, and you'd need 2 conductors on at least. Another point is we have the ticket machines, and a lot of time and effort goes into those, servicing them, making sure they work well, and we trust people to use them. Now, I accept there is fare evasion. I'm not doubting that at all. The other point I would make is that Oldham Liberals want a trial around there. They put the same motion. Although very Liberals say it'll only be an investigation, a little test down this short line down to Manchester, see how it goes. I don't know if they're going to go from Crompton down to Manchester as well, checking it. And I don't know if, I haven't checked whether Stockport Liberals are going to, no, they can't, they haven't got the tram there yet, but Trafford Liberals or something want it going up there. So it could be, it all costs a lot more for this trial. I would be interested in the cost of staffing of tram conductors on all routes in time. I think we do need a trial of it, I agree with you on that. But I will personally be asking about the cost benefits, because if it's cheaper to have some people, somebody said stealing, but avoiding it, people do avoid paying these things, it might be cheaper for all of us, as being said, for some to evade it, however upset we get, and jump off when we get to Queen's Road and, you know, and so on. We see it all the time. I use trams every day and I see people avoiding it and jumping off as soon as they see yellow Visivest. And when it turns out they're only going home for the lunch, they're not checking the tickets. But there we go. Anyway, so I think the idea, we can't disagree with a study of it, an investigation, but I just think, to quote Supertram, as an exemplar, is not fair, because it's very different to our tram system. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. By the way, just for, did you see that Jeff Boycott got that long-awaited knighthood? Well deserved, yeah. Should have been years ago.
We've always called him Sir Geoffrey for decades.
Yes, yeah. Thank you. Yes, Councillor.
Yeah, forgive me just very briefly, but members from all sides have raised very pertinent practical potential issues with it, but the motion actually calls for a trial period of 12 months, after which it will be evaluated to see. So I think it's a very sensible motion. I think we can all agree that a pilot period, it's not calling for all lines from morning till night. It says on one line for a 12-month period, let's do it, support it and move on.
Absolutely. But before we do that, we need to give Councillor Pixton a chance. He did reserve his right to speak. Councillor Pixton.
I'm fine, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And Councillor Powell, you do have the opportunity to sum up.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just very briefly, just thank all the comments from all sides of the chamber, and yeah, all very constructive. Thank you for the feedback. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any amendments? If not, all those in favour of the motion? Aye. Any against? Any abstentions? On this occasion, mayors usually abstain, but I think I'll push the vote out and I'll support this as well. It's a good notice of motion. The next notice of motion is slightly unusual in that it's an urgent notice of motion. There was a Labour notice of motion about Bury Football Club. That's been withdrawn. Councillor Daly has submitted an urgent notice of motion, which I've agreed to. There is a great deal of interest in this. And so, slightly unusual, but nevertheless, I think on this occasion justified. So, Councillor Daly, calling you to move the motion.
Mr. Mayor, can I thank you very much for allowing this motion to be heard here today. I'm not a Bury fan. I very rarely go to the matches. I'm not pretending to be something that I am not. I am a football fan, and I think that for many of us, where you are from and the football team you support is central to your being. My two sons, born and bred in Bury, both sport teams beginning with Manchester, which I find rather difficult to understand, but there we go. I am a Huddersfield Town fan. I remember, like it was yesterday, my first time watching Huddersfield Town watching them in 1982. Being a Huddersfield Town fan is central to who I feel I am, my link to my past, to my heritage, to the history of the place that I'm from, and I do speak regularly with my colleague Councillor Walker about these things. The basis for this motion is founded not only in that, but also in an opportunity. It's founded in the need, I believe, for this council to do something about the appalling situation involving Bury Football Club. It also asks us, and I just want to say this is not a party, people can, if they want it to be party political, then please let it be party political. The Conservative group aren't viewing it as that. This also is a motion about what we are as a council, and sometimes, perhaps none of us ever think about that. But what are we as a council? What do we exist for? What is it that we can do? What are we part of? We're part of the community of Bury. We are part of protecting the interests of the community of Bury. There are people in this room who have supported Bury for many, many years. I'm not going to lecture people about supporting Bury. But the demise of this football club I've seen friends of mine who it is a bereavement to, friends of mine who I won't name, who've been going to watch Bury Football Club their whole lives. People who it's their only way of getting out of the house, it's the only way they meet people and socially interact with people. It's been the highlight of their week for years. I've met too many people, as I say, who share my view of football, being it is a link to your home, it's a link to the past, and it's a link to being proud of where you're from. And I think every one of the 3,000 to 4,000 who regularly supported Bury feel that, and I would hope that all of those thousands who over the last 135 years have followed Bury Football Club would also feel that. So, where are we? We are in a situation where the club has been badly managed. I'll be nice if I can put it that way. And there have been efforts, and very good efforts, by all parties, all individuals, to try and find a solution to this matter. The financial issues surrounding the club are such that it is quite, for those of us who have a little knowledge of this, one can understand why potential buyers have been scared off or been concerned regarding some of the information that they've had. But I believe that Bury Council now, because there is a very short time frame for us to do something, the EFL have given a date of around the 21st of September for Bury Football Club or a person or an organisation to come forward to be put forward a credible plan as a potential buyer of that club. Nothing has happened over the weeks and the months that have gone past, and the time has now come for us as the elected representatives of the borough to do something. There will be different views regarding what you do with the amount of money that potentially would be required to buy this club, but that could be a debate for a later stage, and I understand that. But if one looks at Bury, not only in terms of the football club itself and the cultural, social, heritage, economic benefits, the clear economic benefits to employment, to the amount of money that people spend in the clubs, pubs, shops, restaurants on a weekend, there is also, I think, a very strong argument to say that Bury Football Club and its Gig Lane site provides a justifiable strategic purchase for this council to broaden the services, the statutory services that they can provide to some of the most vulnerable in our community. Our aims as this council, one of the major things that drains this council's purses is social care, health issues related to that. We have, since I've been on this council, we've tried to think of different policies to encourage a healthy lifestyle. We were talking recently regarding how do we take services into the community rather than people having to go into hospital or into expensive care. How can that be done? How can people be inspired to change their lifestyles, to take a different course? How can they be inspired to interact with people, to make different choices, to hopefully make choices that are healthy for them? I believe that, and the list is endless, I don't have time, and we all know that the services that could be provided from this building, we would have a sporting facility that would allow, I was at the, Mr Mayor, at the pitch event in Tossington. Bury Ladies Football Club has been created. It now has nowhere to play. It had links with Bury Football Club. This is a site where you can... that football club in a matter of weeks went from 2 people to, I think it's 200, a figure like that. You could have people with disabilities, young girls, young boys, everybody, I think, would be inspired as part of a community to use that facility to give people access to the place where, I'm going to use one, where Neil Imlach played, where some of the greatest players who played the game played on that field. And I think that that opportunity, that inspiration would be fantastic. It can be a place where people meet together. It can be a place where people end social isolation. We once had a motion in this about loneliness and about the health benefits of that. Can you imagine a more... I can't imagine this council tempting a lot of people to a meeting in a tower block in the middle of Bury. But just perhaps to Bury Football Club, the history, the significance, the cultural thing, that can bring people together. There are facilities at Bury, I wouldn't go so far as to say banqueting, but the social club and other things which can be used as revenue generation. So we can take what is a very bad situation potentially, not only try and provide some support to those people who the Bury Football Club is part of their lives, but can actually increase how we deliver our services, better how we deliver our services, and impact on people's lives. Impact, that thing I said at the start of this, what does it take to make people change, or to at least make different choices in their lives? Well, perhaps just being part of a community together with a professional football club, hopefully, that could make some difference. I think it is potentially a very exciting prospect. So the motion I put forward is not asking you here to debate whether you should spend money on this or money on that. It is asking whether, and there is nothing to be lost by this, nothing to be lost at all. It's asking the senior officers of this council to approach Mr Dale or the representatives of Mr Dale to enter into a negotiation to say that we have a potential interest in this. Let's not hide away from that. And what is it that we could potentially do? If the persons I've just mentioned come back and say, we want £25 million and thing, then that's the end of that discussion. But nothing is lost. Nothing is lost in this motion. You are not making choices here tonight to say, let's spend X million or whatever the figure is on this. You're simply being asked to say, let us investigate this. Let us act for all those people for who this means something. And it's very often we talk in this council a lot about what we can do and what we can do to impact on people's lives. You all know in this that if we were to do something like this, for good or for bad, this would impact. This would impact people's lives, thousands of people's lives, in a positive way. And if we don't exist as a body for that purpose, then we should just give up completely. Not a political point, we can do this. So nothing is lost.
1 minute, Councillor.
Sorry, I do apologise. I've had discussions with officers. If, following comments, people want to have discussions regarding financing and things, the way that I would look at this, I can say that the financing of this, if it were ever to get to that stage, and I do that with a big if, this wouldn't come out of the expenditure about the budgets, but there are ways of financing this, members. There are ways of financing this, and I've spoken to various officers who can admit to speaking to me or not. There are ways of financing this which is self-financing, which will, the running cost of keeping this going can be financed by the organisation that we as a council and a community, and working with other partners, because part of this motion very clearly says let's work with other partners. So please support this. It's not party political, it's simply giving hope to a lot of people out there.
Thank you, Councillor Daly. Seconded by Councillor Nick Jones.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm proud to second this motion to Council this evening, this being one of the most important motions to come to this Council in a very long time. After all, it is not every day such an important community asset faces extinction. Bury Football Club, as Councillor Daly has alluded to, plays a huge part of our town for the past 134 years. It would be a huge blow if the club had to close its doors. But let's remember, Bury FC is not just any football club in the country. It is our club, Bury's Football Club. Bury is a club which our town can be proud of. It has a long and deep football history with 2 FA Cup titles, along with holding the only record to be the first club to score over 1,000 goals in 4 divisions of the English Football League. Whether you support Bury FC or not, and I'd like to place on record I'm a Manchester City fan myself, I've not actually been to Bury football. But the fact that every Saturday afternoon, midweek or on a Saturday, the name Bury comes up on people's lips. For a town like Bury to even have a football club adds immense kudos to our town. OK, we may not be a Premier League, but every time those Saturday scores are read out, we are there. The motion tonight proposes to instruct the Chief Executive and the Chief Finance Officer of Bury within 24 hours to contact all parties who represent the interests of Bury Football Club Limited to enter negotiations to potentially buy the club. We simply cannot stand by and watch this saga and see the end of Bury FC. Let's remember, we are elected to represent the people of this great town, and now is the time to carry out our duty and do our utmost to save our town's club. Mr. Mayor, I was most disappointed to read on the Bury Times website today that the leader of the council has concerns about supporting, and I quote, a strongly worded motion at a sensitive time for the club. Now is the time this council needs to show leadership and to save our town's football club in their hour of need. He said the Labour group would facilitate negotiations. Well, Mr. Mayor, this saga has been ongoing all summer, and the time is not something the club has. There are numerous instances, as Councillor Daly has alluded to, where councils up and down this land have bought football clubs to help save them. I and this Conservative group strongly believe that as councillors of Bury, we must do all we can, collectively, to bring an end and save the football club. It was not that long ago that our Greater Manchester neighbours, Stockport, completed the purchase of Edgeby Park from Cheshire Sports, which ultimately saved that club. We simply cannot stand by and watch the demise of Bury, though I do wonder if the end game with some people is house building. With that in mind, we are proposing that within 7 days of today, Wednesday the 11th of September, for the Chief Exec and the Chief Finance Officer to have taken all necessary steps needed to enter negotiations to buy the club and or Gig Lane in isolation. It is imperative that this is done before Wednesday the 18th of September to have secured a figure of the purchase of the aforesaid. We fully understand that time is needed for proper due diligence. Therefore, we are proposing that the Chief Exec and the Chief Finance Officer of this council contact the Chair of the English Football League to set out plans in order for the council to put a creditable plan in place. And I'd just like to add, Mr. Mayor, that a sports economist, Professor David Forrest of the University of Liverpool, carried out some research in 2015 on why local authorities should save struggling town football clubs. He said, thank you, Mr. Mayor. He said that they should be saved because of the social capital that they generate within communities. His very research was carried out by surveying residents of Luton and, yes, Bury. His research concluded that it is evidence that there is a case for Standard Welfare grounds to purchase clubs in order to save them. He estimated from his research that Bury Football Club, the community benefit alone, creates around £242,000 a year for the wider community. Mr. Mayor, football clubs are more than just a business. Even those which have never won a game, no chance of winning, of aspiring love for the club. Bury FC is the heart of our town, our community, and that brings everyone together. No matter what religion, race, man or woman, boy or girl, the positivity it creates brings a sense of unison to everybody. The demise of Bury FC due to one man does not only affect the football club. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Are there any comments? Councillor Jones, I think.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's not often this is going to happen, but I commend the comments that both the Leader and Deputy Leader of the Conservative group have made this evening. It's clear looking into your eyes that you're passionate, your belief is strong, but be under no illusions here. That is shared by this side of the chamber as well. I think as a council, we have these responsibilities. We have to discharge them carefully, thoughtfully. I agree with everything that's been said about the nature of a football club and how important they are to the identity of a town, the additional benefits of having visitors coming in from all over the country every other Saturday and us going elsewhere. All that is a given. And I've been rehearsing those comments now since the day the EFL's kind of pulled the rug. What we are suggesting, and you've heard we've got an alternative, an amendment, does not detract from what it is that you want as a political party. What we will be saying shortly is that our end goal is exactly the same as yours. It's how we get there that's slightly different. That's all it is. And there is time to play, because we've been working on this now for nearly a month, and we can carry on that journey. We're not ruling anything out, but at this moment in time, our ambitions are the same as yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Any other speakers? Certainly, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to start by thanking the Conservative Group for bringing this motion, and also thanking you, Mr. Mayor, for allowing it on an urgent basis, because obviously this issue is something that has arisen and developed since the deadline for motion. So I think you to be commended to do that. I mean, like other people said, I'm not somebody who is personally a football fan, but what I am is an enormous fan of the Borough of Bury. And I think lots of good things make a borough a great place like Bury. But I know, having lived here for all my adult life, that one of the things that makes Bury such a marvellous place is its men's football club, and I think that is to be commended. And it is absolutely devastating to see a club which has such an amazing pedigree and has been seeing success on the pitch in recent years as well, so tragically taken away from the leagues. And I think there are quite clearly people to blame for that. Both. It's not for me to say, but we know who I'm talking about. So I think the Conservative Group are right in saying it is the responsibility of the local authority to take leadership in this area. What I'm less sure about, to be honest, is about money, because I think councils have very little money. We need to make decisions that are balanced about the different priorities that the borough has, which includes, our responsibility for some very vulnerable people. And what I think we should be doing is exploring all the different options that the council may have in leading a situation where Bury can continue to have a football club in the league. And there are many different ways that might happen. And I think what's been proposed by the Conservative Group, which is a purchase, a financial one, I guess is one of those. But I'd be really interested to hear some of the other ideas. And I think it's too soon to perhaps pin our ideas on one route. Particularly at a time when the council, we know, has very little money, but we do have lots of other levers that we can pull as a council to help save the football club. So I would like to thank the Conservative Group very much for bringing this motion. We absolutely admire your sentiments, but I think, in conclusion, we would want to explore as many options as we can do to achieve saving the great football club of this great town. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Fixton. Any other speakers? If not, are there any amendments?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I've got an amendment on behalf of the Labour Group, if Democratic Services would like to circulate it, and I'm sure they'd like a short recess to consider it. Thank you.
So we'll distribute that, and I think a short recess, Councillor Daly, would be in order. Yeah, particularly as I need to go. Councillor Daly, I'm suggesting 5 minutes. A little bit longer? 6 minutes. Ladies and gents, are we ready to continue? We've had 6 minutes, which I said would, so I think there's still a lot of business to get through, and time's running out quickly. So, are we ready to start? Everybody ready? Okay. Take your seats, please. Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Walmsley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And in moving the amendment, I want to start by reiterating what the leader said, that all of us in here want the same thing, and that is for Bury Football Club to continue playing league football at Gig Lane. Let's be clear, Stuart Day, the previous owner, was responsible for financially running our club into the ground, a situation which ultimately led to the EFL expelling Bury from the league after 125 years membership. And Councillor Daly's right, people are grieving. This isn't just about 90 minutes once a week during the season. It's the coming together of people in the heart of our community year round. And all that has been destroyed through financial mismanagement, a lack of scrutiny and a lack of governance. And from the start of this tragedy, the Council pledged its support, initially in providing back office resource when the news first broke that staff weren't being paid by the club, and more recently in being a key stakeholder in the rescue board that was set up by James Frith, the Member of Parliament for Bury North, in which Gig Lane sits. The Rescue Board has members from a broad spectrum, including the Supporters Trust Forever Bury, Mayor Andy Burnham, Ivan Lewis MP, the Greater Manchester Combined Authority and Bury Council, all with a collective aim of assisting in keeping Bury FC as an English Football League club. We also have wider support from experts in the field, including names you probably recognise, Mr Mayor, Andy Holt from Accrington Stanley and the former Burnley CEO Dave Edmondson. And I support Councillor Daly's proposal on evolving the club into a community hub that embraces men's football, women's football and youth teams as well. To this end, the Rescue Board is actively working towards a resolution that the club, the town and the wider game can unite around. The board set up a working group to develop a proposal to the EFL that would allow them to consider admitting Bury to League Two next season, subject to the submission of a credible plan to rebuild the club before the end of the year. This position was put to a meeting of Forever Bury members on the 3rd of September and was agreed unanimously by the 700-strong people in attendance. The Rescue Board is currently preparing a clear proposal to submit to the Football League by Friday 20th of September that will allow us an opportunity to work towards re-entry to League Two. In addition, Forever Bury met the EFL last week and have since sent written submissions to the EFL to help bolster support from other league clubs. If the EFL agree to the board's proposal, we'll then work on a credible plan to rebuild the club, which Forever Bury, the Greater Manchester Mayor, the MPs and Council can support. In addition, Steve Dale, the current owner, has agreed to give us the time needed to identify a suitable new owner for the club, and discussions are currently ongoing with prospective new buyers, both via Forever Bury and James Frith as recently as yesterday. In order to give the EFL confidence in this process, the Combined Authority and Bury Council will work together to provide external challenge to ensure financial viability and long-term stability of the club. The EFL have since responded, acknowledging our efforts and agreeing to consider our proposal. And it's worth pointing out too that James Frith has discussed matters throughout with Conservative MPs such as Alistair Burt and Damien Collins, and the work of the Rescue Board has to date been praised by the current Sports Minister Nigel Adams MP. So we must be doing something right, Mr Mayor. And so our amendment is proposed with all this in mind and in recognition of the work ongoing through the Rescue Board to bring about a realistic long-term solution for the club continuing with league status under new ownership. Our amendment also recognises the need for change in the governance, which is why we're recommending an invitation for the Digital, Culture, Media and Sport Committee, who are carrying out the inquiry into the administration of football clubs, to come forward to Bury and hear evidence from fans and interested parties. We need a clear strategy that enables new investors to come forward, for due diligence to be carried out.
1 minute, Councillor.
Thank you. And for the club to continue playing league football at Gig Lane. The Rescue Board is already carrying out this work, and I would urge all members to vote in favour of our amendment to support the already collectively agreed objectives. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Spot on. Thank you, Councillor. To be seconded by...
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm formally going to second the amendment, but I will reserve my right to speak.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further speakers on the amendment? Right, we've got a number. We'll have Councillor Caserta first and then Councillor Quinn.
I'll be very brief, Mr Mayor. Thank you very much. Can I just say to you, I can't claim to be a Bury supporter. I can go back to the 60s with my father, seeing Ray Parry, Bolton playing here with crowds of 22,000 on a Tuesday night. Happy days. But really, for those of you in the chamber who are season ticket holders of whatever team, you'll realise with me the pain that it must be inflicted on these Bury supporters, knowing that their club is about to die. If your own club, and probably everybody knows my allegiances, and I've been a season ticket holder for a lot of years. If anything were to happen to the Blues, I'd be absolutely tormented. And it must be a terrible sight. But I'll be quite brief. As far as I'm concerned, we've got two motions in front of us here. Ours is basically taking the money. We've got the money because we've got access to the money in the Capital Fund. We're talking here of 13 times Istanbul restaurants. The Istanbul restaurant that means nothing to Bury. It's a potential marketing property. 430,000. This is Bury's livelihood. This is their life that we're talking about, and we're asking to go into the Capital Fund 13 times the Istanbul. So there's no argument about it. Or we've got the motion from Councillor Walmsley, which is saying to us that there's a committee and this, that and the other. I haven't got a problem with that. I would ask you one question and then I will ask our leader to vote for your amendment. If you can guarantee to me now that you will save Bury Football Club, this side will vote for your amendment. No ifs, no buts. You guarantee that you will save Bury Football Club, because our motion does that. If yours does it, it's just a different way. But, you know, quite honestly, if you can guarantee it, and we keep saying James Frith, James Frith, James Frith, you know, fine. Let him take some kudos out of it. But as long as he saves Bury Football Club, stand up, Councillor Walmsley, tell me guaranteed that you will save Bury Football Club with your amendments, and we will vote with it. Am I right? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Caserta. Councillor Quinn.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. I want to specifically talk about governance in that section 5. Why are we in this mess? It's governance. Football governance. I'm a United fan. I've not been there for 14 years since that gang took over. But I have also spent 10 years at GIG with FC. But I'll go back to 2011, Mr. Mayor, and a report from the Commons Culture, Media and Sport stated that major changes were needed to the way the game is run in England, and the levels of debt, financial instability, revisited in 2013, and the Sports Minister then said he would legislate against English football if they didn't put the house in order. Nothing's happened. 2016, again, the same committee brought the FA back to Parliament. Nothing's happened. What we have, Mr Mayor, is a succession of clubs in difficulty at the bottom and the top of English football. Bury, Bolton, Blackpool, Blackburn, Oldham, Charlton, Coventry, Macclesfield, to name a few. Portsmouth once had 6 owners in 1 year. Brighton had the ground stolen from under the noses. It's now a retail park. The FA, on numerous occasions, has failed the fit and proper persons test. The English Football League has failed Bury as the takeover did not satisfy its own rules. It's the FA, they're supposed to be the guardians of the game. At the top of English football, Mr Mayor, leveraged takeovers of United and of Liverpool. In the case of United, a debt-free club that has now paid out £1 billion, loans, fees, payment in kind, interest payments, now paid into the low-tax state of Delaware. Liverpool, a club, again, had £300 million worth of debt to be rescued. Mr Mayor, the birth of the FA Premier League in 1993 promised a golden age of English football. It has been gold for the players, the managers and the agents, but what they also said was it will improve the national team. We've had 13 competitions since then. England haven't been in the final once. The latest TV deal, £4.4 billion. I think Bury might get 400k out of that. And where's all that spent? It's paid in the Premier League. City, £151 million in prize money. Huddersfield, Councillor Daly's club, relegated, but still got 96 million. The combined bill of the 2 Manchester clubs, the wage bill, £500 million a year. Bury could survive on the wages of one of these Premier League prima donnas, and most of them can't even take a penalty. But we also see, what we also see is at grassroots level, nothing. The first job when you play junior football, the first thing that parents do is pick the dog poo up off the pitches. A lot of these pitches are unplayable in winter. They're rubbish. Now, we're going to get some of these pitches too. We are going to get them in Bury. But if you go around Europe, they've had these pitches for years. On the coaching side, England has 6,000 coaches with a top UEFA badge. Germany, 36,000. Italy, 35. Spain, 25. Who wins all the trophies? Not England. We also have the fiasco of the National Stadium in Wembley. The competition was actually won in 1995 by Manchester, had to be rerun because London didn't win it. That stadium cost £789 million. That's the cost of City's ground, which is now the Etihad with Manchester Commonwealth Stadium, the Stade de Paris, the Principality Stadium, the Sydney Olympic Stadium, all cost the same as Wembley, which then put St George's Park National Football Centre back by 10 years. And that is where this English talent is supposed to be nurtured. So again, what we need, Mr Mayor...
1 minute, Councillor.
Thank you. Is our MPs to again go back. What we need is governance. The FA and the English Football League can be the regulator, but they don't wish to. And on many occasions, they have the rules to do that. We need we need regulations on football ownership. The fit and proper person test must be dealt with. Every takeover must be scrutinised. Pele, finally, Mr Mayor, Pele once called football a beautiful game. But for this little Towns club, it's the exact opposite. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Quinn. Any other speakers on the amendment? Councillor Nick Jones.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm very grateful for the history lesson from Councillor Quinn, but Councillor Jones, this is your first council meeting, I think, where you are the leader throughout the whole of the council meeting. You've got the opportunity, as leader, to save the club. Vote with this motion. Nothing to do with party lines. We've just put it forward. Save the club, and then you'll go down in history as the leader of the council that saved the football club. Very simple.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Right, number of speakers. I'm going to take Councillor Tariq, Councillor Daly, and then Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think it's important in all of this, and as members have said, that this crisis has been ongoing for a number of months. And one of the noticeable things that we've picked up during this time is the unrealistic expectations that have been set for fans and for the wider community. There have been people that have come forward who've put bids in place. The EFL have extended deadlines. There has been, at different times, there's been people's hopes that have been raised. And unfortunately, I feel the discussion and the view that we're getting from the Conservative group is again about unfairly raising people's hopes, because they know as well as we do that this is not a realistic proposal which they brought before Council. In terms of facts, Mr Mayor, there are no football clubs in England that are owned by the local authorities, none at all. And actually, it's not a simple case of around purchasing Bury Football Club. It comes with some risks, and some very severe risks, which include paying off former football players and staff. It includes inheriting the CVA, which in itself would include a significant debt to HMRC. And it also includes the loan, which stands at £3.7 million, which has also caused some difficulty to potential people who've been looking to purchase the club. So as reasons that have been laid out by colleagues, I think it's our duty, as the leader of the council has said, to yes, support Bury Football Club, but also we have to manage expectations and manage the communications and the tone that we're setting for our borough tonight. We have to be responsible about this, and I think it's important that we don't set those expectations to a level where people feel that they're not being able to be achieved. From Bury Council's point of view, right from the outset, we've been very proactive on this. We've been proactive in the discussions with the EFL. We've been proactive in communication, both verbal and written. We've been part of the rescue board meetings that have been facilitated by the Member of Parliament for Bury North. We have been in discussions with the current owner. We have done everything that we can as a local authority, both visibly, privately, and in relevant meetings, to stand to protect this community asset, which is so important to many people in our town. And I think tonight it's our responsibility to ensure that we set a responsible tone. Thank you.
Councillor Tarek. Councillor Daly.
I promise to be a good boy today. I've heard some stuff in my time, but this really does. The last speaker, I don't know particularly the reason for that contribution, but if he doesn't speak to the Chief Finance Officer, that's a matter for him. I've spoken to the Chief Finance Officer of this council regarding how this matter would be financed. This matter can be financed. The purchase of this club can be financed. And I get back to the point of this, that this is a motion regarding exploring the option of doing it, not doing it, to see whether it is possible. So this, I might be living, it seems to me to be a parallel universe. I mean, if it comes down to this, and you know, you all take your view of me, whatever you want to take your view, and everybody up there will, on that screen, whoever's watching it. But if it means more to you to have James Frith's name mentioned 10 times and Rescue Board another 10 times and saving this club, shame on you. Shame on you. And that's what this comes down to. That red badge is more important than people's lives, people's futures in this place. This can be done. I'm telling you it can be done. It's all right, shake your head. This can be done. People out there, this can be done. You won't do it because you want some fantasy for political point scoring that's been put forward in this motion. If that is what you want, if that's what your major thing about being in this council chamber is simply to score the most minor political points, it is beyond belief. It is. If I look at people in here who I respect greatly, who are Bury fans, I am astounded that you could do this. I'm astounded. You You're not interested, so why bother even talking to you? The political point scoring. Let's all do it. Let's all sing his name, James Frith. Let's all do it. You know, if that's what you want, if all you want is to get on social media and say how wonderful it is in the rescue board, and the irony, I mean, it's wonderful that the rescue board has spoken to the sports minister and various other people, hasn't spoken to any Conservative in Bury, as far as I'm aware. Has no interest in that whatsoever in taking into account views. So I find this, I'm sorry, Mr Mayor, I find it extremely sad. You could have done something tonight, but you chose not to for the worst possible reasons.
Thanks, Councillor Daly. Councillor O'Brien. Okay, that's enough of that.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I was going to stand up and say, from where we began this debate until I stood up, the Conservative group were actually contradicting themselves. Councillor Daly said, this isn't about doing it, it's about exploring it. Councillor Caserta stood up and said, it's about doing it, we're going to save it. Then it went back to Councillor Jones, and Councillor Jones says, you have a chance to save it. And then Councillor Daly came back and said, well, we're not actually going to save it, we're going to look at saving it. There was a total contradiction back and forth, but then Councillor Daly contradicted himself. He said, we're not actually going to do it, we're going to look at it, but we can do it, and we're going to do it, and now's the chance to do it. And the reality is, actually, that this is about being responsible, and it's about being grown up about it. And we're not playing politics with it when we say that any action that this council takes has to be responsible. More so than ever before, we have to be responsible about how we spend our money. And I just want to highlight perhaps another area of contradiction, because it was raised, the Istanbul restaurant. And it said, all it is 13 times that. Well, isn't that, if only the world was like that. Oh, well, it's just 13 times that, so it must make sense. It's such an outrageous approach of oversimplifying what is a very complex issue. And it is actually beneath us and our responsibility to manage the finances of this council as best we can in incredibly difficult circumstances. But in the instance of the Istanbul restaurant, Councillor Nick Jones had grave concerns then about spending money. He said it comes with some serious risks. There's no certainty and there's no clear plan. Before they spend that money, they need to outline those plans. Well, now we're being told, we'll just spend the money. It's only 13 times what you didn't want in the first place. The reality is...
Listen, this is getting out of hand. Sit down. Sit down. All this clapping and shouting is all very well. There are people up there waiting for the next notice of motion. You'll speak in a minute when I say so. Stop all this silly bantering about good speeches coming up being spoiled by all this shouting and bawling. It's not seamless. I sound like this John Burko now, don't I? But please, let's keep it civilised. Councillor O'Brien will finish and then Councillor Harris will speak.
So it is very clear who is playing the political games in this chamber at this point. We began saying we were agreed. We all want to do what's best for Bury FC because it's what's best for Bury. The reality of life is that things are a lot more complex than sometimes are presented. I actually think a lot of Bury fans know that to be true because they've been behind the work of the rescue board. They've been behind the work that's gone on over months between the MPs, between Andy Burnham, between Councillor Jones as leader, between our chief executive. They've been behind that hard work that tries to deal and grasp the realities of the financial situation behind Bury FC. And I'll just finish on this. Our officers give advice. That advice may or may not be presented in the right way. The advice I've been told is that, of course, borrowing can be self-financing. We propose that all the time for our schemes on the road and other aspects. We borrow, we invest to save, we invest to grow. It is not the case that you can simply pluck this money and say it pays for itself without a clear plan, which actually their motion agrees. We don't have a clear plan, we have no business case. We actually have just a series of ideas that we might be able to afford this with. That is not how you do business, that is not how you manage the finances of this council. That is why we need a more sensible approach, which this amendment actually does, and that's why we should be supporting the amendment and not a series of loose ideas around what is a very admirable aim. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Brien. Councillor Harris, and then I'm moving on.
I'll be very brief and try to be sort of not passionate because I know nothing about football. I've never been to a football match, so perhaps I can look at this in a more sort of reasonable way. I think there is a disappointment that this motion has been amended, and I think this is perhaps why there's all this anger, because basically I'm just reading it very simply, and it says produce a business plan regarding the potential purchase for all councillors considered. So it is it's offering a possible solution, and that's the way I read it. And then if a business plan can be provided, this is how I'm reading our motion, then it will come before this council for us to consider. And I just feel that this is a very sensible motion. It doesn't make any rash promises. I think, all right, there has been a lot of anger, but if you look at it rationally, why not? What is there to lose in doing this? And really a disappointment that it needed to be amended. That's what I'm saying. I hope I've made the point quite simply and not emotionally. Thank you.
Sorry. Councillor Walsh, you did reserve your right to speak.
I'm obviously new to the chamber, and I've listened very intently to very experienced speakers. I speak to you as the elected representative of Red Vales, where GIG is and where I am a season ticket holder. Councillor Walker is nodding at me because he sits 3 rows back from me, so he too well knows this. You know, I can talk to you about community, and I very much get Councillor Daly and Councillor Jones' points about community and it being a bereavement, and I really understand that. You know, I can talk to you about being introduced to football, my father-in-law taking an elderly gentleman, a veteran, who remembers seeing Bury win the FA Cup in 1903. This is a massive bereavement, and I agree with you till then. I note that Councillor Daly said, quote, we're not making this party political. And then Councillor Jones said, nothing to do with party lines. I do almost laugh a little. Councillor Jones, you'll know about this, because you've done quite a lot of laughing tonight, because I've been watching your body language quite intently, that actually... you have, sometimes very disrespectfully, I might like to add. Very, very importantly, the phrase coming to the party late. For me, this is a blatant attempt to derail the work of the Rescue Board. And I'm sorry to say, where have you been? Where have you been when I have stood outside Gig Lane as the councillor and the season ticket holder? I keep hearing you're not Bury fans. You're listening to a Bury fan now and somebody who represents Shakers fans. Councillor Walmsley, who, I'm sorry, Councillor Caserta, I feel you attacked and put on the spot. She obviously can't guarantee that. Nobody can guarantee that. And quite frankly, this is party political. And to quote Councillor Daly, shame on you.
Thank you, Councillor. Please. Councillor Walmsley, to sum up on the amendment, then last word goes to Councillor Daly.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. In response to Councillor Caserta, Mr Mayor, he asked, can we save Bury Football Club? That's precisely what we're trying to do with the work of the Rescue Board. And the amendment that we've proposed seeks to achieve the positive outcomes for the club and the community referred to in the original motion. And I repeat, we're all united in here. We all want the same thing, which is to keep Bury Football Club playing league football at Gig Lane. Our amendment is also a response to a motion tabled under urgency provisions only yesterday to what is a very fast-moving situation. It's changing by the hour. And I can't help but wonder why, so late in the day, the Tory group come with this motion. And yes, we've spoken to local Conservative people. It's been cross-party throughout. No doubt, given who moved the motion, they have one eye on the winter election that's coming. But it's not about playing political football. It's about having a realistic plan to help save our club. We've got a strategy with the Rescue Board. We're putting a proposal to the EFL on the readmittance to League Two by the 20th of September. Thereafter, if that's acceptable, we build a credible plan before the end of the year in which we rebuild the club with a long-term, sustainable financial plan with new ownership that everybody can support. MPs, the Greater Manchester Mayor, the Council, Forever Bury, the Supporters Trust, the fans, shakers in this chamber, that everybody can support because it has one collective aim. And so I'm asking members to support the Rescue Board strategy and support our amendment, Mr Mayor, to make that the substantive motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Walmsley. Councillor Daly, you get a chance to sum up, and this will be the last opportunity you get. We then vote.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr Mayor. I'm amazed, Councillor Walmsley, you've just said that, bearing in mind our telephone conversation last week. Amazed that you've said that. The Conservative group will support anything that is positive and is hopefully will contribute towards the survival of Bury Football Club, and will contribute to what was a bigger vision regarding providing public services to the most vulnerable in our community, to have a facility that the town could be proud of, that the council with partners could take forward, and we could really leave a legacy that would have been a very proud legacy, and hopefully would have played its part in terms of preserving league football, but having a far bigger impact in the community. What we're left with is a rescue board that I know, well, that I know nothing about. I know nothing about the discussions, and I don't think anybody in the Conservative group, unless I'm going to be mistaken about, no idea what's going on with that. No idea what a plan is to save Bury Football Club. No idea about anything. Yeah, it was the comments were made regarding some of the speeches and the comments that were made, but we were confident in putting forward this motion because we knew that there was a way of financing, the council could finance a proposal. But we didn't want to come here and say, just off the top of our heads, yes, here's let's just go off and buy Bury Football Club. The point of the motion was to say, let's send the chief officers of this council to go and speak to the people who have legal ownership of this club. Let's look at that. Let's see whether we can do it. Let's put together a business plan, and let's see whether we can do it and bring it back here. That's what this was about. And why you wouldn't allow that, why you wouldn't support that, is something that I don't know why you wouldn't support that. Why wouldn't you support that? I mean, just why wouldn't you support that? I mean, how is it wrong to support that?
It's your motion.
But anyway, Mr Mayor, we will support this with a heavy heart. We'll support anything that is positive, that is hoping to save Bury Football Club, but a real missed opportunity. And I suspect this town will regret this decision for decades to come. Thank you.
Councillor Daly. So we're voting on the amendment as moved by Councillor Walmsley and seconded by Councillor Walsh. All those in favour of the amendment, please show. I think you better stand up. It's going to make it easier to... You can, yeah. I'm only abstaining because it's custom to do so. I did for Bury Football Club is at my heart, but I will abstain. It's the convention. In fact, no, I'm going to... Yes. No. Let's make it totally unanimous. Oh, Councillor Walker. I don't think. I think you can vote, Councillor Walker. Okay, fair enough. All right, you said it. So the amendment is carried. So I should ask, anyone against? Any abstentions? Councillor Walker, you're abstaining. Yeah, you're abstaining, Councillor Walker, just to be clear. Yes, you're absolutely right. So that now, the amendment now becomes a sub... Yes.
I'm not a football fan, right, but I'm curious, and maybe you'll satisfy my curiosity. Councillor Walker declared an interest and didn't vote.
Right.
But Councillor Walmsley and who? Are you both members as well?
Councillor... Councillor Gunther, we are wasting time. I don't know why you're raising such a technical point. No, please, sit down. We've got another very important notice of motion to consider. The two things are different. Councillor Walker has done what he's done. Councillor Walmsley's position is totally different. The amendment has been carried and therefore becomes a substantive motion. All those in favour of the now substantive motion as amended. That it doesn't. That is carried. Thank you. Anyone against? Any abstentions? I think Councillor Walker abstains. Okay. Thank you for that. Although we seem to have a lot of time, we're running out fast. Another important notice of motion concerning taxi drivers to be moved by Councillor Daly.
Well, first of all, I should say thank you very much to the Public Gallery for sitting through what we've had thus far and for waiting for this important issue. A number of the questions, Mr Mayor, or a number of the issues contained within the Conservative motion have been addressed by way of verbal questions from the Public Gallery, and I don't intend to cover all the points within this motion. The reason this motion came about for a number of reasons, but one of them, Mr Mayor, may be surprised to hear this, in that the Conservative group organised a public meeting in Red Vales regarding the issue of taxi drivers, and I was surprised, or perhaps I shouldn't be surprised, that sat on the front row in front of me when I began to speak was Councillor Tariq. So hopefully he'll be coming to more Conservative meetings to lend his support to those. And one of the things that happened when we left the meeting, or when it broke up, was an agreement, which I hesitate to say because it never works in this place, that all parties would work together to help taxi drivers to address a number of issues. Whether that works, I don't know. We'll see in a minute whether there's anything in that, but I hope it is the case. I've had the pleasure of speaking to numerous taxi drivers, all good, decent people earning a living. I think taxi driver touches perhaps as many families as any other profession in our borough. It's an honourable, noble profession where people have, the taxi drivers have an immense responsibility for health and safety issues, for the safety of passengers, for the safety of all road users. And speaking with those involved in the industry has been an absolute pleasure. And it's an honour for me just to put forward a few thoughts to hopefully suggest to Bury Council things that could make and assist taxi drivers in going forward, earning their living and doing the fantastic job that they do for the people of Bury. The first thing is the point that was made regarding the MOT centre. If it could be clarified whether we're getting an MOT centre back in Bury, I'd be very grateful, because I'm not clear on that. But I'd like to take this a step further, and I would say this as a Conservative representative, is I don't agree with Councillor Jones. Councillor Jones made the point saying that we need having one MOT centre means that is a guarantee of a minimum level of standards. I don't see that as an argument. If you had 3 MOT centres, why should that be any different? It's a minimum guarantee of standards, and we as a council, I think, should support choice, we should support local business. So I think that one of the things that I asked the council to speak on and ask Councillor Jones to comment on is, yes, we may well be having a MOT service station here, but let's have 2, let's have 3, let's make prices competitive, let's make it a system where taxi drivers can go to different places, and that may well drive down costs. We are in favour of driving down costs. We don't want anybody who uses the services of Bury Council, if they can get those services cheaper elsewhere, I am assuming that Councillor Jones would support that. So that is something that we want to do, and I would urge Council to support that. The second important factor I would like to comment on is the testing of motor vehicles. I accept the minimum standards, but I think that having one individual MOT centre essentially allows the people within that centre to impose standards which are unrealistic and unreasonable. It cannot be either sensible, realistic. In fact, in some ways, it's beyond belief that a taxi driver could fail his testing certificate because he's got 2 scratches on the side of his car. How can that be right? And there are examples of that, and I'm sure the gentleman up here and other people can give examples of an overzealous attitude to the examination of vehicles. Yes, I think nobody would have any issue regarding if there's a mechanical failure of a vehicle, but scratches, mud on mud guards, things like this, these are minor matters which surely shouldn't lead to failing of a test and the costs involved in a retest. And I do think that not only should we be reviewing how we interact and how those tests be carried out, I think it would be good, healthy competition to have other test stations locally. And it's somewhat ironic that people can come into this borough, drive a taxi who had a test in Wolverhampton or other places, which is nowhere near as onerous as the test that you would get in Bury. So it's a complete differential in standards, in requirements, in costs between taxi drivers, and that's completely unfair, and I think we should look at that. I also feel that from my discussions with taxi drivers, and I've seen no evidence to contradict this whatsoever, that in many of the things, the issues that come, I feel that we have unfortunately drifted into a system within Bury where a taxi driver there is an issue, and it seems to me it has to be for the taxi driver to prove their innocence rather than actually establishing that there is a case to answer for whatever it is. I think that some of the comments and the stories that I've been told regarding how the issues that taxi drivers deal with every day have been dealt with by this council are completely unacceptable. I know there is a motion going, and I hope very much that the Chief Executive, Councillor Jones and others will very much look at that. This should be a culture of respect where taxi drivers are central and crucial to that. We should be communicating everything. If there's a change in fees, if there's a change in anything, taxi drivers should be consulted. You can't ignore the people who are delivering the service. And it is completely unacceptable. And I think we need a full root and branch review as to how we treat with respect people who are earning a decent living in our community. I would also like to make a comment regarding the so many titles for things, I forget, the clean air charge, I think it's called. Now, one of the things I hope, again, and perhaps this is a conservative looking at life, but one of the reasons I'm involved in it is I don't see the need for a charge. Now, yes, the argument will come back, and quite rightly, that it is something that dealt above, should we say, the Bury level. But I think that at GM we should be going there, and Councillor Jones or whoever's responsible should be going in and saying that we should not, as a principle, be penalising people with the clean air charge who have to pay it to carry out their job. You know, in the job that I work in, I have a certain career, I'm not going to be paying that. Why should I be any different? Why should people who are carrying out important functions, transporting some of the most vulnerable people in our community, have to pay a cost which is, to me, in those circumstances, is completely and utterly unacceptable. And the motion asks the council to argue strongly that there should be an exemption to the clean air charge for taxi drivers. So I finish with this. We have a fantastic group of people delivering a fantastic service who are not getting the service they deserve from this council, in my view. We need to ensure that communication, respect and decency is at the centre point of how we deal with taxi drivers, that the testing is not to an extent where people are losing licences. And also, I think as well, that perhaps this is training, but it does. If a taxi driver, for whatever reason, a claim comes forward and the licence is at risk, we do seem to I think we should think very carefully when removing licences for people whose families rely on the income that comes from them able to carry out their trade. And sometimes I think we as an organisation do not take that as seriously as we should. These are people's lives and people who are supporting families through their hard work. I commend this motion. It's a good motion. I think there's other issues which hopefully my colleague, I can come back to talking about them regarding safety and how we can offer financial support to ensure that taxi drivers feel safe, and as well as protecting their customers as well. But again, we come back, a very positive motion, something that hopefully we could all get behind. I've said that about 10,000 times in this chamber. It's not worked yet. But hopefully Hopefully we can, and hopefully we can work to have a really positive future with the really positive and really important members of our community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. To be seconded by Councillor Hussain.
Mr. Mayor, thank you very much indeed. It gives me great pleasure to second this motion. And with your leave, Mr. Mayor, is it okay if I speak on the motion now? Of course. Mr. Mayor, you personally would recall that back in 1998, when we saw the arrival of Bosnian and Kosovan refugees in the borough, I recall, Mr. Mayor, you were here, and the borough showed its compassionate side to some very vulnerable people, refugees and asylum seekers from Bosnia and Kosovo. Bury showed its compassionate and its best side. 2 years later, in the year 2000, we had the tragic murder of the taxi driver, Tariq Javed. His family are very good friends of mine. And our taxi drivers at the time showed their best side, because we almost had riots in the town centre of Bury, and Councillor Dave Jones would remember that Chief Superintendent Steve Westcott and Divisional Commander Philip Hollywood and Chief Inspector David Bleakley worked with the taxi drivers to ensure that potential riots were quelled in the town centre of Bury. Our taxi drivers stood up for this borough. Mr. Mayor, before I came to this meeting, I had a taxi driver on the phone to me. He was almost in tears because he had his licence revoked by Bury Council. He appealed via solicitor, went to Manchester Magistrates Court, and his appeal was not upheld. He said to me, I've got 5 children. I've got a mortgage. I can't speak English very well. What am I going to do? Where am I going to find £10,000–15,000 to buy a new car so that it is sufficient for Bury Council's requirements? Mr. Mayor, I feel that this motion, which I commend to Council, is about 3 things. It's firstly about our perception of taxi drivers. Do we perceive our taxi drivers as important stakeholders within our community, as belonging to the community, or do we see them as the enemy within? Secondly, it's about respect. Are we giving due respect to our taxi drivers, hackney or private hire? Or are we treating them with contempt and disrespect? And thirdly, it's about communication. Is it dyadic communication, two-way communication, or is it just us imposing laws on our taxi drivers and then we becoming the law in all this entity? These are 3 questions that we as a council must ask ourselves. Mr. Mayor, the taxi drivers have a very difficult job. On a daily basis, they are victims of verbal abuse, physical abuse sometimes, racist abuse, and I know, as the former director of Bury Racial Equality Council, that the vast majority of such abuses are racially motivated, as was the murder of Tariq Javed. That the vast majority of these incidences are not reported to the police. They're not reported to the Bury Council because they feel that they will be seen with suspicion. So this is something that we need to change. And I propose, Mr. Mayor, that every time a taxi driver has an important issue, and even if it's gone to licensing, in addition to licensing, there should be some kind of an independent committee that looks at such issues, that if a driver has got 2 or 3 scratches on his car, or if it hasn't been validated properly, why should it fail its MOT? Why is it that Bury taxi drivers have to go to Bolton to have their MOTs done? And every time it fails, they have to pay the repayment fee. Yeah? It's unfair, and I believe that they have a genuine case. So I would commend, Mr. Mayor, that we have some kind of an independent parallel committee to the one that we have now, so that we then can say that we are transparent, you know, as Councillor Collins used to say, we are transparent, clear and concise. So I feel, Mr. Mayor, that this is a very good motion. It supports our taxi drivers. We need to see them as part of the borough, not as some separate entity. And I commend this motion very well, and I would to the council, and I thank Councillor Daly for choosing this particular motion over other motions. And I really respect that he's done this. And I hope that we as a council can support our taxi drivers tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Please, we need to move on. Councillor Jones.
Very briefly, Mr. Mayor, if I may, just a couple of points that Councillor Daly and Councillor Hussain have made. For 7 years, I chaired the licensing committee, so I have some experience of the views that are expressed. And I agree that we need them, we need to work with them. And that was exactly what happens in that when I chaired the committee, I used to meet the taxi drivers on my own with a council officer in a room of about 12 or 13. And if the licensing committee had made a decision that they didn't understand, we didn't give away any confidentiality, but we would go through the issues. And the example you gave about the poor gentleman who went to the magistrate's court on appeal and then lost his appeal, that's the law of the land. We make no comment about that. These things will happen. On the specific points that Councillor Daly raised about the testing station, it's my understanding that the testing station is going to return to Bradley Fold. It's also my understanding that we are going to review its continued existence. So a part of what you've said, we will be reviewing the whole testing regime. Now, I think there are others in the chamber that are more up to date than I am, but that's the general picture of what's happening. The reason they go to Bolton is because otherwise they would have to go further afield. Bolton is the closest neighbour. So we're not unfairly treating them. We are trying to deal with them with compassion, with feeling and with respect, as you've suggested. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Any further comments? Councillor Walker.
Yes. Years ago, I served on licensing committee for a long time. I've been on since the 70s. Used to be chairman of a licensing committee. I just say that as a brief background and experience, because Councillor Jones has given us his experience. And I've always supported the driver's request for a second private inspection workshop in addition to Bradley Fold. And I've said that publicly at licensing committee on more than one occasion. I've always felt there should be a choice, just so long as both garages work to the same council set criteria, and the council has the right to inspect the private facility to maintain consistency. It's always been my point. It happens in lots of other areas in life, and I can't see why we have to have this monopoly. I believe in a degree of competition. I suppose that's why I'm conservative, which can influence not only the standard of service offered, but the attitude to the customer. So you might go in one cafe, one shop, whatever, not because it's cheaper or it's a different standard, because people treat you better. And I do that myself, I'll be honest. So it may be different reasons why you need competition, not just price. The request seems more urgent now following the fire at Bradley Fold. Put the one inspection unit we had out of use for a lengthy period of time, and drivers, as I understand it, are still having to go to Bolton. I can't understand this at all. It's beyond me. Makes Brexit planning seem pretty good, you know. We can't find somewhere else for people to have an inspection in our borough. I did raise this question most recently at overview and scrutiny to a senior officer there who said it was best to contact another senior officer. And I did on August the 2nd about all this before our motion. As yet, I've not had a reply. As I understand it, drivers still having to take time out from their work and income to go to Bolton, and I presume this is still the case. If you have an MOT and there's a slight problem and you take it back, you know, later in the day, or they do a repair for you there, you don't pay twice. And I think that's a very good point. That if somebody has a minor defect, they shouldn't have to pay again. So I do support the drivers on that point. There are pros and cons of having two testing stations in Bury. but the one down in Prestwich or in Pilsworth area, as well as Bradley Fold if it ever comes back into use, seems self-evident to me. I would wish to let the taxi drivers who approach me, a lot do, after church on a Sunday morning, they queue up in Kew Gardens to have a go at me about these sort of questions. So I'd like to, including someone you know, Madam Deputy Mayor, to have a go at me, and I'd like to be able to answer them sometimes, as well as those in taxis which I declare a personal interest, because not pecuniary. I do pay my fares, but so they don't take me for free, so I would then have to not discuss this. But I use taxis a lot, and I talk to the drivers, and I would like to tell them back what has been said. I think the company I use regularly provides an excellent service, and I won't name it, and the drivers are always very polite, and I don't know why there is this problem in the borough about somehow the council with the drivers. I hope we can solve it, and I hope I will get a response to my request for a report on why we can't move away from just having a monopoly, particularly as it's in Bolton. I don't think we're playing fair by these staff. I wouldn't go all the way with my colleague, some of the things he said, but I do feel they deserve better from us, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Any further speakers? Yeah, Councillor Ryan.
Mr Mayor, thank you very much, Mr Mayor. I'll keep it as brief as possible. It's really over this MLT testing. As you know, Mr Mayor, served on the licensing committee as many times as I've been a member of this council. Enjoyed yourself many a time there. Councillor Jones has been an excellent chair, and now Councillor Rafiq is chair, and both Councillor Rafiq and Councillor Jones just keep it every time non-political, which it should be, like planning is. This issue of the MLT station has come to the committee many, many times before, and every time, the first time I saw it, I was completely in favour of having a separate MLT station, but there's never been proven that we can keep a good standard. And it's not the MLT standard, it's the other standard, the standard of having fire extinguishers, the wheelchair access and everything else. There's been no proof that we can keep that nice standard that we do like across the borough in you know, consistent if we have more than one station. And that has been roundly supported by all sides of this council, of all members on a regular basis. And unfortunately, we can't really support the motion as it is at the moment.
Thanks, Councillor Wright. Any other speakers? If not, are there any amendments?
Mr Mayor, I do intend to move an amendment, please.
Thank you, Councillor. Do you intend to distribute it?
I think it's already been distributed.
It's been done. Sorry, I didn't get one. Okay, so carry on, please.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mayor, for allowing me to speak. I am moving an amendment which has, like I said, been circulated with the best interests of Bury taxi trade in mind. I'm going to go through this paragraph by paragraph of the Conservative motion. The paragraph 1 of the Conservative motion gives an impression there was never any MOT station at all in Bury. This was also quoted in Bury Times only 2 days ago. It's simply misleading. We do have a vehicle testing station, as we've already spoken about, in the borough at Bradley Fold. I acknowledge that since February this year, due to a fire at Bradley Fold, the trade has been inconvenienced, but I wouldn't say that's unfair treatment. There are plans, and I can confirm that, for it to reopen in November of this year. At the moment, we have one vehicle testing station that's determined by council decisions, policies and procedures, agreed by all parties. If there was ever a growing need, justification or a commercial viability for a second station in the future, it could be looked into, but it has always been about quality and standards, which means safety and security for our drivers and passengers. And you will recall at the last full council, this was also referred to. Following a request to provide the trade with additional testing facilities, the council agrees to carry out a review and appraisal. The council has implemented satisfactory questionnaires we are looking at further service improvements, including MOT certificates, a service level agreement, and vehicle testing manual, which will deal with things like the scratches and other failure issues, of all which will be discussed with the trade at the trade liaison meeting on Thursday, 19th of September, in these chambers at 1 o'clock. I propose, therefore, the amended paragraph 1 and ensuring Bradley Fold does reopen. As to paragraph 2 on the Conservative motion, I just said there is an agreed taxi trade liaison meeting. That is the forum to raise concerns. Any issues, including dissatisfaction, will be on the agenda. I therefore propose the amended paragraph 2. On paragraph 3, division and politicising by using terms like them and us is not helpful, and I feel it's very disappointing. We are one, we work together. Let's not encourage such culture. The council licenses thousands of drivers and operators and vehicle owners. Communication of matters is usually via trade liaison meetings where relevant issues are discussed. There is a statutory requirement to advertise and consult on some fees, such as operators of vehicles, and this is done formally via press notices. All other fees are approved by full council before implementation through formal council budget setting meetings and are available on the licensing services webpage. I agree to keeping local taxi drivers and the trade informed on matters which affect them, so that's why I am proposing the amended paragraph 3. Paragraph 4 on clean air could be deemed unlawful, I must say. The TFGM solicitor was consulted in relation to that. It is the government, not the Greater Manchester Mayor, which has mandated local councils, including Bury Council, by a legal ministerial direction of July 2019 to comply with the roadside nitrogen dioxide gas exceedances in the shortest possible time. And all GM authorities are working together with the TFGM on this. The government directs us to submit a full business case by the end of 2019, which is being done, and to implement a clean air zone Class C in 2021, enabling compliance by 2024. The government's preferred option for compliance is for non-compliant vehicles to suffer a daily charge. That is the government's preferred option. Any default would be the responsibility of Bury Council and not the GMCA or the TFGM. Therefore, Bury Council cannot afford to opt out of the plan and risk legal challenge and penalties. I will refer to the London ultra-low emission zone in my summing up. It's no comparison with the TFGM. I propose, therefore, the deletion of this paragraph in total. Paragraph 5 is a common minimum standard. Proposals are currently on hold. I feel matters like CCTVs is currently irrelevant. Bury Council does not mandate CCTV equipment. We have asked the government for £28 million funding for the taxi trade in GM to help with clean air compliance and await approval. Any review of the current fee structure for the council can be done at the fees and charges report in early 2020. Taxi licensing fees are calculated on a cost recovery basis, and any excess profit is returned to the trade. There is no excess money available to supplement the taxi licensing trade. A 20% cut now would result in additional pressure on the council of £78,000. Any fee reduction could mean reduction of service. That's not fair on the trade. So I therefore propose the amended paragraph 4, welcoming any financial support from outside. Lastly, paragraph 6 of the Conservative motion, the council constitution delegates the revocation of licences to the licensing and safety panel consisting of members from all parties. Additional delegation exists at the head of training standards and licenses, or in her absence, the licensing officer, in consultation with the chair of licensing and safety panel, who can make a decision to revoke a licence in the most serious of cases purely on the grounds of public safety. Finally, we have no records of vehicle licences being revoked. We have record of 5 decisions refusing to renew vehicle licences in the last 6 years for vehicles failing to comply with vehicle conditions. 2 did not appeal. 1 was appealing, but the council did not contest this. 1 had appealed, and the court reduced 8 faults to 5 with no cost to the council. And 1 appeal, most recently, I could tell you only yesterday, was dismissed by the Magistrates' Court. As good practice, I therefore still, however, propose a regular review of the revocation process as per the new amended paragraph 5. I am therefore moving the amended motion in its entirety. Thank you.
Mr Mayor, I will formally second the motion and reserve my right to speak.
Thank you. Any comments? Councillor Tariq, then Councillor Quinn.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just to refer back to the point that Councillor Daly made earlier about the meeting that took place, as we said in previous debates, I think it's important that we keep such issues that are important to people in our town non-political. and this is one of those as well. I didn't realise I was going to a Conservative Party meeting. I thought it was a public meeting for taxi drivers, so that's the intention for which I was there, but obviously your intention was slightly different. Anyway, going back to the issue in terms of the standards and the experience of taxi drivers in our borough, I think, again, like I said in the previous debate, Mr Mayor, we all have a responsibility to be responsible in terms of our discussion and our communication around this issue. Our taxi drivers, many of whom are my constituents, who work very, very hard in our borough. We wouldn't be able to function without them. They do a remarkable job, give long hours of service right across our borough with very little reward. And we can all appreciate when we have had discussions with taxi drivers and they've shared their experiences. Sometimes it's not a pleasant experience in terms of some of the challenges and difficulties that they can face going about their day-to-day business. But I want to put on record, certainly as a local councillor for Red Vales, my thanks and support to the taxi driver friends that we've got here tonight, but also those that are not here, to put on record our thanks for the brilliant work that they do. In terms of the safety, I know that was mentioned during public question time as well, and more generally in the debate tonight, Mr Mayor. I know 18 months ago it was a specific issue where we had over a couple of months a number of serious attacks to taxi vehicles, and that was unfortunate and it was unforgivable in my view, because at that point I know that certainly members of the taxi trade felt as though they were seriously under attack and vulnerable when going about their daily business and their working life. So I was pleased to at that point call a meeting of the taxi drivers with the then Chief Inspector for Operations, Phil Spurgeon, to raise with GMP some of the concerns, and I note that Councillor Jones was also present in his then role as Chair of Licensing. From that, we then were able to support the Taxi Association in partnership with GMP, putting in a bid to the Safer Communities Greater Manchester Fund for dash cams, which was a small amount of money, not dash cams that could be provided to every single taxi vehicle, but it was a way of testing out a method of ensuring that drivers were able to feel safe and had appropriate evidence should things go wrong. And I think it's important, Mr Mayor, as I said earlier, that there's a quasi-judicial service that we provide as an authority. It comes under one of our regulatory services, and it's important as an authority that we do always look at ways we deliver our service. We do look at how we review our services, and we ensure that those people who are beneficiaries of our services have the trust and confidence as well. I think that's really, really important, and where we do make mistakes and where there are difficulties and challenges, that needs to be looked at and addressed appropriately in the proper manner. Reassuring to hear the leader earlier talk about the changes that are coming in at the end of November, and Councillor Rafiq has referred to this as well, in terms of the new MOT station which is coming at Bradley Fold, which again I don't think certain elected members and other stakeholders haven't been really responsible with the language around this, because the closure of Bradley Fold was as a result of a fire, and I often have found that that gets missed when that's discussed. It's important to speak about facts and that issue. That wasn't a deliberate decision taken to inconvenience drivers, but that is being addressed, and Councillor Jones has said that there is potential to review the MOT services that we provide for taxi drivers once the new station is up and running at Bradley Fold. So I just want to, from my point of view, Mr Mayor, just make those points to say that we do support our taxi drivers, and to say that we want to work with them as a local authority, and we will continue to do that in whatever way is possible. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Tariq. Councillor Quinn.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Mentioned about clean air, so I think it's only fair that tell about clean air. The EU Ambient Air Directive was passed in 2008, became English law in 2010, and the coalition government basically kicked the can down the road for 5 years, until a group of solicitors called Client Earth, environmental solicitors, took the case 3 times to the Supreme Court High Courts of Justice, whatever it was, and the government was found in breach of its own clean air regulations. The government then said, well, clean air is a problem for local authorities, and instructed 58 local councils, including those in Greater Manchester, to clean up their air. Now, what we've always said, Transport for Greater Manchester are acting on behalf of all the authorities in GM, and as Councillor Rafiq says, we are under a ministerial directive. And I'll just say that all 10 Greater Manchester local authorities are now under a ministerial direction, the Environment Act 1995, Greater Manchester, and the Air Quality Direction 2019, to implement their clean air plan for nitrogen dioxide. If we don't do that, then we are in breach of a ministerial guideline. We could be fined. We're not in a position to pay fines. What we've always said across Greater Manchester is we will implement the clean air zone, which is different from a congestion zone. The congestion zone is there to make money. It's in London. A clean air zone is there to green up the fleet, so you get more green vehicles coming in, whether it's petrol Cat 5 from 2006, diesels are more problematic from 2016, and when you get electric vehicles, and also if we ever manage to franchise the bus service, hopefully we can take use of the Clean Bus Fund. So there's 3 areas to the funding, Mr Mayor. There's the Clean Freight Fund, the Clean Taxi Fund, of which we have asked for 29 million to give our taxi drivers the chance to get cheap finance and to green their fleet. I don't know whether it's 12 million or 24 million taxi journeys a year. And it's our taxi drivers that, a lot of these taxi drivers, they're old vehicles. A lot of the fleet in Greater Manchester, per se, cars are old. And that's because we're a poorer borough. And that's why we've got clean air, or dirty air, which is actually killing 1,200 people a year. So what we've always said, I reiterate, it's dependent upon the government giving us, and that's a figure calculated by Transport for Greater Manchester, 116 million quid. They've offered us, I think, 36. Nowhere near enough. So where we are up to now is the government have told us to implement, issued a direction to implement the plan to achieve compliance in the shortest possible time and implement so that human exposure is reduced as quickly as possible. We've sought council and gone back to them and said we disagree with that. Now, when all this is sorted, when we have the final business case, that has to come back to this council and all the other councils across Greater Manchester and be passed. It then has to have a 6-week public consultation. So our friends, the taxi drivers, can comment on this and have their say. But on top of this will probably now slip. It could slip well into next year. And by the time you slip into next year with all the shenanigans about Brexit, you're then into Purdah. So this might not be passed until this time next year. So what we've always said is this is dependent on the government giving us the money to implement the Clean Bus Fund, the Clean Freight Fund. The motion states, it's mentioned that there's hard-working taxi drivers. I couldn't agree more with that. But there's also hard-working self-employed people. 89% of the businesses in Greater Manchester employ under 10 people. What do they have? Diesel vans. They bought them diesel vans as an investment. If there was money there tomorrow, the market could not support. There's just not the capacity to bring in these new diesel plans. It's a bit of a dog's dinner, and it's always has been, but we're trying our best. So we need the Clean Freight Fund, we need the Clean Bus Fund, and we need the Clean Taxi Fund. And if the government actually cops up, then we can go a lot of the way into cleaning up our act and hopefully getting the finance that these taxi drivers deserve. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any further speakers?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, basically in the form of a question. What I first of all don't understand is Councillor Jones mentioned, and it was mentioned by Councillor Tariq, that Bradley Fold will be under review. If it's going to be under review, or the stations are going to be under review, why are we trying to spend the money at completing Bradley Fold? If at some point we're going to acquiesce to what the drivers want, which is independent stations. That's something you might want to comment on. I don't know. Maybe I've misunderstood. But capital spending, why would we bother if we're going to end up opening up these other stations, independent stations? That's one question. The other question is regarding this Clean Air Fund. Again, Councillor Quinn is talking about money and this and that and the other. The proposals, the way I understand it from Andy Burnham, is that any taxis registered outside the 10 GM authorities would not be entitled to any compensation or any refunds or monies towards their taxis. I don't know how many taxis operate in Bury that are registered outside Bury. I haven't the faintest idea. Maybe you might be able to tell us, because obviously those people will not be entitled to any of this money. And finally, I mean, I've read this thing. Some nights I've got nothing to do, and I've read this Clean Air proposal by Andy Burnham, and one of the basic tenets of the GM, the combined authorities, is that all 10 authorities must agree to this proposal. And I'd like to have on record from Councillor Jones, having looked at the proposals, is he now saying that Bury are going to accept these proposals from Andy Burnham? Thank you.
Yeah, I understood that. Okay.
I'm
all these things when he sums up. Any other speakers? If not, Councillor Black, you reserved your right to speak.
Yes, and I will be very brief, Mr Mayor, because Councillor Quinn and I, half of our speech was practically identical. I do want to echo the comments that have been made about the work of taxi drivers, and I thank you for your patience in sitting here and putting up with us this evening. I will just whittle this right down. Councillor Daly wants us to seek exemption from the clean air charges. We've told him this is not in our gift. I believe Grant Shapps is now the Minister for Transport. We need to be lobbying government. We've had previous debates here about the amount of road tax that's paid in Bury that goes straight to the government, and the lack of resources for improving our roads and for transport investment in the north compared to London and the south east, where one roundabout scheme cost as much as came to the north last year, I understand. I think that's the point. We need to be working together, that's the phrase of the evening, I hope, to put pressure on the government to properly fund this. We had a motion last time on climate change emergency. Everybody needs to work together to give ourselves cleaner air and better and reduce emissions from vehicles. So I formally second the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Black. Councillor Rafiq, to sum up on the amendment.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Firstly, can I just say that I know, obviously, there are a lot of taxi drivers here in the gallery, and there's many watching a live stream because I've received a lot of text messages, etc. Now, as chair of licensing and safety panel, I want to just assure them that I am actually listening to them. I do understand their issues and the trade in general, and I will help, and I am helping. You can nod, but that is the case. I've been a chair for only a number of months, so I am trying. And I've been listening to you at the panel hearings. I've also met many trade members personally, in their offices, who have also raised issues with me, and I've assured them that their issues will be addressed. I want to acknowledge at this stage the hard work and the risks of all our Bury taxi drivers, which and the risks that they take on a daily basis to provide the safe, secure and accessible transport. So, and I also acknowledge that Bury Council must do more to support our taxi drivers, and we will continue to review and improve the licensing standards. Now, I believe that whenever one person or one party brings a motion to council, it has to be for the right reasons, genuine reasons, and they must be at all times have the interest of the parties who are being affected, rather than being, it might not be the case in your case, but political or whatever. It has to be in the interest of these the drivers and the trade, etc. On the issue of the clean air, if I could just confirm that yes, like Councillor Alan Queen has said, this is a legal ministerial direction of July 2019. It has to be done. If you're not going to do it, there are repercussions, and the council will itself be liable for the same. A quick point about the London ultra-low emission zone. The situation with the GM clean air plant proposals is actually not directly comparable to the ULEZ in Greater London. London ULEZ exempted taxis partly because they're iconic black cabs and have wheelchair accessibility. It's important to note that no new black cabs will get a licence in London unless clean air compliant. Also, important distinction, London ULEZ was granted on a mayoral prerogative. It was not a legal ministerial direction, okay, by the government, as was the TFDM. TfL uses its own funds to clean air plants through licensing standards. We here know the GM plants need government funding, and London has a greater capacity to manage their own operations within the need to consult other government bodies, such as the Joint Air Quality Unit, part of the Department of Transport, Department of Environment, Food and Rural Areas. So, there was a question raised by Councillor.
1 minute, Councillor.
Councillor Conservative with regards to vehicles from outside being charged. Well, I think they should be charged. The whole idea is to protect all taxi drivers and the trade within the GM. And any cars coming from outside, if they're being charged, that's my understanding of the question. Or rebate? Well, it's the same thing. I mean, they should not be entitled to any rebate either. It is one of the issues that's always continuously been raised with me by taxi drivers, is why are taxis and coming from outside into this area? It's affecting our business, etc. And now, if we're going to start giving them rebates, I think we'll just do the opposite. So, in summation, I therefore propose the amendment and ask for your support. Thank you,
Councillor. Councillor Daly.
Well, it gets back to the old thing about putting forward a motion that actually asks the council to do something that potentially benefits residents of this borough, and finding reasons and excuses not to do anything. Inaction reigns yet again. If Councillor Rafiq seems to be defending the system that's in place now, so I suspect that if you ask any of the gentlemen and other taxi drivers within the borough, I think you should talk to them and see what their views on that, because they would vehemently disagree, I suspect, with a lot of the things that he said here today. The argument appears to have been put forward that I misled the council by saying there wasn't an MOT system in Bury, even though it had been burnt down and there wasn't one in here. So we don't have an MOT testing centre. As I said, one of the reasons why I asked Councillor Jones to clarify the MOT testing situation is there was this suggestion of a review of how we were going to carry out MOT testing going forward, but also in this amendment here, it says in 2019 we're definitely going to have an MOT testing centre at Bradley Full, which I certainly hope that we do. I see there are MOT testing stations in the private sector within Bury now. It would cost the council nothing to give them the franchise or give them the ability to be able to carry out this test. Literally nothing. Councillor Wright said that there was no evidence regarding if you had a second testing station, whether this would maintain standards. Well, that's unbelievable. We never had a second one to test that out in the first place. So let's have a second one to see whether you're right or not. And at least we can see whether that's the case. There's nothing to suggest that reputable tradesmen in the private sector who've been working for years and years and years on cars couldn't carry out these tests to the standards that have been outlined and that the council wish to maintain. I think it's a very fair comment that's been made regarding the interaction between the council and taxi drivers. I hope that will be taken forward. A suggestion regarding an independent committee, which my colleague very articulately put forward, is, I believe, an absolute necessity, and I hope that council will see that as a positive step. In terms of the clean air charge, in London, black cabs are, as with all of these things, it's in the definition. But let's just for once, rather than me going over that, let's just for once stand up for local people. There's always an argument. There's always some law that none of us have heard of or whatever to say we can't do something. Let's just stand up for people. Let's stand up for what's right. Let's do what's right for people. And this is what this motion's about. So it's been a good debate. It's been a debate where the concerns of an important section of our community have been represented. They're going to be ignored, but they've been represented and put forward. But let's hope for a better future. In terms of the amendment that's going to be put forward again, it's not what we want. We don't accept it. It's nowhere near what should be delivered. But anything, again, that is positive or at least a step in the right direction, we can't not support that. And we hope this is the first step that Bury Council will take to support the objectives that were set out within our motion. And therefore the Conservative Group will be supporting the amendment on that basis.
Thank you, Councillor Daly.
A point of order, Mr Mayor. Again, no, I'm sorry, but I think we've just had something like, let's break the law. It was mentioned that the ultra-low emission zone. Now, I've got this from the TFG. Not a point of order. Now, I know we're into breaking the law.
No.
I'm sorry, but it was...
I will in a minute, but just...
No, I'm sorry, Mr...
Come on, Councillor Quinn, get to the point. Please.
What I'm saying is...
Be quiet, please.
What I'm saying is, now this is off the TFGM solicitor, the ultra-low emission zone in London was done on a mayoral prerogative. The clean air zone, again, is on a ministerial directive. We cannot break the law. If you don't have the law, you have anarchy. Now, I realise that the leader of the Prime Minister likes to do that now and again, but we don't.
Come on, Right, we're voting on the amendment as moved by Councillor Rafiq and seconded by Councillor Black. All in favour of the amendment, please show. I think you better stand. Thank you. Anyone? Thank you. Sit down, please. Anyone against? Any abstentions? That's just me the amendment now becomes a substantive motion. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to stand again. All in favour of the notice of motion as amended? Anyone against? Any abstentions? Only me. Now carried. Thank you for that, and thank you for your patience, gentlemen. It's much appreciated. Thank you. Not much time left, but if we go now, Leader, to your statement and see how far we can get with questions after that, please. Thank you. Okay, Councillor Jones. I'm saying, Councillor Jones, I think we should finish it. It's been a long night, a hard night, a good night. I think we should finish at 10:30 and the rest of the business takes care of itself. Thank you.
As you wish, Mr Mayor. I've deliberately waited for the gallery to clear because I wanted a bit of a step change. I indicated earlier that I did want to make reference to Councillor Nuttall, Susan Nuttall, in so much as I first met Councillor Nuttall before I became a councillor. And it was at a charity dinner in Prestwich. She was raising money for the lifeboats, I think it was. And I was there and I was sat next to her. And her husband, David, was there as well, before he was an MP. And we had a very friendly, convivial conversation. What nice people. That's what I'm saying. Then about 2 or 3 years later, I bumped into her at a dog training class where I was taking my dog. And they were there with their crazy... yeah, that's him, yeah. The Dalmatian, was it? But again, my point is this, and it's a serious point. I found her to be very friendly, and by that point I had declared my red flag, and I obviously knew their status as well. But that didn't interfere with our dog training classes every Saturday morning. So I wanted to pay my respects in that way, in my own way, and thank you for your indulgence, Mr Mayor. As this is my first speech as leader, let me say at the outset that my #1 priority is to serve the people of Bury, to the best of my ability and to promote our great borough within Greater Manchester on the national and international stage. I am particularly determined to do all I can to support Bury businesses. I look forward to our debates in this chamber. And whilst I'm sure we will have lively and at times robust disagreements, I intend from my part to do so in a constructive and calm way. Respecting at all times, Mr Mayor, your task, sometimes a difficult task, in trying to keep us all under control. Mr Mayor, we live in uncertain times. Nobody is any clearer about the final outcome of Brexit. Leaving without a deal is now a very real possibility. And my responsibility as leader is to ensure that the Council is as prepared as it can be for all eventualities. We are preparing in 3 ways. The first, Bury is playing its full part in working with the Greater Manchester Combined Authority in supporting businesses and making our local economy as resilient as possible. Second, the Council is working to ensure continuity of delivery of our essential public services. In this, we are joined by our partners, our new partners at Bury CCG, who are working hard on planning for the impact on the borough's NHS services. Third, we all need to think about the impact of all this Brexit uncertainty on our communities and on community cohesion. We need to be thinking ahead about our own future as Bury, something I'll mention again before I finish. The people who will be most affected by Brexit will of course be the young people of Bury. While national politicians have been endlessly debating Brexit, the borough's children have been hard at work preparing for their exams, and we've seen the fruits of their labours in this year's results. We saw improving results at primary level. GCSE results held up well, and we saw excellent outcomes on A-levels, including our 2 colleges who had some of their best ever results. Now, I don't hide from the fact that we still have more to do to support our schools, to get back to being Bury known as a national leader in providing the very best education and skills. But this year's results have held up well and are definitely a step in the right direction. Mr Mayor, there have been 2 meetings of the Cabinet since our last meeting. In July, we considered the financial monitoring report for April to June. This shows how the cuts of £12 million, which we had to include in this year's budget, which was of course on top of the £100 million cuts over the last 10 years, are being implemented. This is incredibly hard to do, hard for our residents and hard for the users of our services. But the monitoring report at Cabinet shows that we are getting there. At the same time, officers are working on options for the budget over the next 3 years. These options will come forward for discussion and debate in the new year. Since the last Council, the Government has announced its comprehensive spending review. Whilst this includes some better news for local government, the hard truth is that it does not mean the end of austerity for council services. There will have to be further spending reductions next year. Since our last meeting, the Cabinet has approved the creation of a single council-wide HR service by centralising the different human resource functions in each department. I am really pleased to see this as somebody who previously worked for this council. It is a part of the wider changes to create a new corporate core, which will be both more cost efficient and more effective in developing our workforce. The Chief Executive will be bringing forward to Cabinet further changes like this to improve the way the Council works and to reduce the costs of management. One of my first engagements as leader was to attend the ceremony to mark the start of work on the new industrial development at Chamber Hall Business Park. This will provide 400 new jobs very close to the town centre. Cabinet has also approved a range of initiatives to support Bury businesses. These include a consultation on a business improvement district for the town centre and investment to increase the full fibre digital coverage. These are the sort of practical ways in which we are helping the business sector that we must continue if we are to protect and grow jobs for Bury people. Mr Mayor, I must mention Bury FC in my speech. As we all know, since we last met in July, Bury have now been expelled from the Football League because of financial management. This is after 134 years in spite of the success on the pitch. It is an insult to the tremendous loyalty of the fans represented so brilliantly by Forever Bury. We have debated this earlier this evening, but just let me say, the financial mismanagement which led us to this point is a scandal. We will support the fight for Bury FC, as we've referred to earlier, and regain entry at Division 2 late next year. But we must also push for a wider review of football finances. What happened to our club is just but one example. This problem needs to be sorted out. Finally, I want to look forward. Whatever uncertainties of Brexit and the terrible troubles of our football club, we do need to look forward. Perhaps now more than ever, we need some positive conversations. We need to discuss together with Bury communities what we all want our Bury to look like in 10 years' time. As a place to live and to make a life, as a place to do business. Bury has so much to be proud of. So let's shout about it. What do we love about Bury? Looking to the future, what do we want Bury to be like in 10 years' time? And then what will we do, each of us with our different contributions to make? What will we do to make Bury be what it wants to be in 2030? I haven't got all the answers, Mr Mayor. I've got views and opinions, but so too will all of us in the Chamber, and most importantly, the residents of Bury. That's why we have launched a wide-ranging consultation on a new Bury strategy, and I look forward to bringing this forward for full debate at Cabinet and Council later in the year. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thanks, Leader. So let's see how many of those questions, written questions, we can get in before 10:30. So I'll call on the Leader to answer question 1 from Councillor Daly relating to Bury Football Club.
The stadium is still in ownership of Steve Dale, but it is mortgaged to a third party. We are supportive of the efforts of Forever Bury to find a buyer for the club, capable of funding the acquisition of the stadium and the efforts to convince the EFL to allow entry into the League 2 from the start of the 2020-21 season.
Councillor Dale, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, Mr Mayor. There is currently an application for first registration of the sports club and the site where the office of Forever Bury is, which has previously been unregistered. That's currently outstanding and was made on the 12th of August. What are the council doing in respect of that application?
It's taken me by surprise because I don't know about the application, Councillor Daly. Perhaps if you can send me the details, I'll look into it for you.
Thank you. Thanks. Thanks, Lee. Call on Councillor Black to answer the second question from Councillor Walmsley relating to additional funding for no-deal Brexit preparations. Councillor Black, getting very tired now. I've been up since 5 o'clock.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Mr Mayor. To date, Bury Council has received £314,950 from the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government in relation to Brexit readiness, with options being developed to ensure the effective use of this funding, including specific engagement with the borough on concerns around Brexit, supporting residents to access digital tools as part of settled status applications, providing support through a voluntary sector partner at neighbourhood level for those most likely to be impacted by withdrawal and from hard-to-reach groups, gaining further Bury-specific insights on the impact of trade on local businesses in terms of import, export and workforce. And because I don't think we'll get to your question later, Councillor Tegolo, just to add on that the specific specification has been developed to secure support from the Bury Community Voluntary and Faith Alliance, and that I'm very keen to ensure that that service is very well publicised. I think you referred to outreach, but I think it, as I'm sort of mopping it up in this question, but it is in. They do have. They are going to be working with residents on readiness for Brexit, and I will find out more details about that myself because I've only got what it's written here and perhaps let you know. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Walmsley, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, please, Mr Mayor. Just kind of wondered what Councillor Black thought would be the likely impact of no-deal Brexit on local businesses and local economy. I don't know if she can...
Well, Caroline Fairburn from the CBI spoke to a group of businesses in Manchester at the end of August. Her analysis in a recent CBI report has shown that a no-deal Brexit could mean an annual loss to the regional economy of 20 billion by 2034. It is very difficult at this point to be able to break that down and say how will that affect Bury. The sector mix differs in every city region, so obviously the implications of a deal or no deal, Noel Edmonds must be getting a lot of money out of this at the moment, play out different ways in different places. It is difficult to predict the impact locally, and the current political uncertainty is obviously not helpful. To mitigate as much as possible threats to the GM economy, agencies across GM are continuing to meet monthly to consider possible impacts arising from Brexit and to prepare for the potential of a no-deal Brexit. Bury Council officers are involved with that process and continue to share the latest Brexit guidance through social media platforms, a dedicated web page, and breakfast briefings delivered in partnership with the GM Business Growth Hub. It is worth looking at the website for the GM Business Growth Hub because it does have a lot of useful advice. And they actually are holding a Bury event on the 1st of October, 10 till 12. Anyone can register for that event. And I've looked at the agenda for that. It looks like it's giving businesses who employ staff from the EU, it's looking at employees' rights as well as businesses themselves.
Thank you. Answer question 3 from Councillor Walsh relating to budget shortfalls at the Council and CCG.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This is clearly a challenging time for health and social care, with a backdrop of demographic pressures and the increases in demand, as well as the cuts that we've sustained. The Council is addressing its share of the shortfall by progressing the savings measures which were agreed at the budget setting meeting in February of this year. Clearly, some of these measures are more challenging than others. However, we expect to be able to balance the budget with some one-off mitigations whilst continuing to monitor the progress on all the agreed savings measures. However, I do have to point out that the shortfall that the CCG is experiencing does relate to chronic underfunding by this government to the tune of £8 million per year. For the CCG, there are plans to cover around 50% of the CCG gap during 2019-20, but with some risk to the delivery of these. The CCG is working with other organisations across the health and care system to identify mitigations and financial support in order to meet the statutory duties for the current financial year. There is no expected material impacts on Bury residents during 2019-20 beyond those previously agreed as part of the budget setting process in February this year. The Council and CCG are working together on a joint medium-term financial plan which will need to address recurrent underlying financial issues. This includes the reviews of urgent care and intermediate care systems, outpatients and other key services. Proposals will be developed with recommendations going through the Council and CCG governance over the next 3 to 4 months, with appropriate public consultation and engagement. Any potential impact on Bury residents will be clearly articulated at that stage. Thank you.
Councillor Walsh, do you have a supplementary?
I do, thank you, Mr Mayor. The Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, has said he's committing 1.8 million of new money to the NHS. Will Bury CCG see any of this money?
Just to correct you, Councillor Walsh, sorry, Mr Mayor, it is billion.
My apologies, billion.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Walker.
Yeah. None of this funding will come directly to Bury CCG, as it's been directly allocated as capital funding for a number of hospitals around the country. The capital scheme, which is most likely to benefit Bury residents, is the following scheme: the Greater Manchester Mental Health NHS Foundation Trust, £72.3 million to build a new adult mental health inpatient unit at North Manchester General. It's also worthwhile stating that although we welcome more money for adult and children's social care for 2021, announced in the recent spending review, we feel that it is unfair of the government to expect council taxpayers to have to foot part of the bill with the social care precept, which is a completely regressive tax on those that are least able to afford it. And we're still awaiting the Green Paper on social care, which was due in 2017. And I feel I'll be standing here in a year's time and still saying it. It's about time the government actually did something about social care. We can't carry on with the sticking plasters. It's not fair on our residents. It's not fair on people who are really struggling for social care. We need a solution to this, and the party over there should really be going to the government and campaigning for this. Thank you.
On the leader to answer question 4 from Nick Jones relating to land at Gig. Councillor Nick Jones at Gig Lane.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. The land on which the ground sits has specific planning status. In effect, that means that if that land was to be redeveloped, then the developer would have to provide an equivalent or an improved facility elsewhere in the borough.
Councillor Jones, do you have a supplementary?
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Councillor Jones. So just to confirm then, there is a restriction on the registered title Gig Lane, is that right? That would prevent house building on the land? So you're saying the current situation on the registered title Gig Lane would prevent house building, is that correct? Thank you. Sorry?
I'm told that there's another question further down that's more specific to that point, but I've answered it about the planning status.
Okay, sorry, Mr Mayor, with the greatest of respect, that was my follow-up. And I'm just conscious it's about 3 minutes. But
What question have you asked? Does your
so
supplementary?
the registered title Gig Lane,
Yeah.
I got the impression from Councillor Jones's reply that that isn't the case, but can he confirm that the current status of that registered title will prevent house building on Gig Lane? Thank you.
He is entitled to answer that, I think.
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Yeah, I'll try and rephrase the answer. So if a developer wanted to build on that site, the developer would have to provide a football stadium of equivalent or improved facility in the borough before that development takes place.
Okay, thanks, Councillor
okay?
Jones. Asked and answered, yeah. Call on Councillor Tariq to answer question 5 from Councillor Susan Southworth relating to educational outcomes for young people.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Southworth, for your question. Although the results we have are unvalidated at the moment, there are still appeals with remarking taking place, and we can still provide a helpful overview. At primary level, the overall position is one of stability. Early years has done well, and there are concerns regarding Key Stage 1, and Key Stage 2 has held steady. Within this picture, Mr Mayor, there have been some notable successes. The Chief Executive has written to a large number of schools where there have been commendable performances. At secondary level, our results are also stable, albeit at a level where we should offer challenge to some of our governing bodies. The post-16 outcomes of our young people are notable to be good, with some of our best ever results. In response to this general picture, Mr Mayor, the local authority has developed and is implementing a robust school improvement programme. This in turn is the focus of both the Scrutiny Committee and of the members group set up to consider our educational outcomes for young people in our borough. Thank you.
Councillor Southgate, do you have a supplementary? No. Thank you very much. Thank you. I call on Councillor Black to answer question 6 from Councillor Mortensen relating to insurance claims paid out by the Bury Council due to potholes.
Thank you, Councillor, for your question. For this financial year to date, 1st of April to 1st of September, total payments for settled pothole damage claims total £1,626.40p. For 2018-19, that's the full year, the total payments for such claims was £43,774, and for 2017-18 the total was £91,457. This reduction is the result of a number of factors. In 2017, the Council commenced a £10 million highway improvement programme over 3 years. In addition to resurfacing schemes, the Council has invested in the latest spray injection patching equipment to reduce the backlog of potholes, and you heard about that previously from my colleague Councillor Quinn. A new highway inspection policy was also approved earlier this year, in line with the latest code of practice, which has allowed more claims to be defended.
Councillor Mortensen, do you have a supplementary? Thank you. Thank you very much. Call on Councillor Tariq to answer question 7 from Councillor Hussain relating to the Children on Child Protection Register. Councillor Tariq.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Hussain, for your question. Reporting year 2018-19, 2,271 referrals were dealt with by the Multi-Agency Safeguarding Hub, which is the MASH, due to suspected abuse or neglect, which equates to 78% of all our referrals. In the same reporting period, 296 children were made subject to formal children protection plans, and 292 children had their formal plans ended, either because they became looked after or they stepped down to a child in need. The biggest category of abuse is neglect, which equates to 52%, emotional abuse at 42%, sexual abuse at 3.4%, and physical abuse at 2%. Bury Children's Safeguarding Board monitors and reviews child protection case conference activity and feeds any issues and themes into training and updating policies and safeguarding practice guidance. The Board's annual 2018-19 report is available on the newly formed Bury Integrated Safeguarding Partnership website, which provides more detailed information on the learning that has taken place. Thank you.
Councillor Hussain, do you have a supplementary?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just very, very quick. These figures are very high. And what solutions do we specifically have to try and overcome the figures which are quite high?
So we're constantly reviewing our practices every three months, and we do compare our figures to our statistical neighbours in GM. But in terms of some of the immediate changes that are taking place that will help around this is our radical transformation of early help. So our early help team has been formed, Mr Mayor, as a result of the restructure of children's services. As well as that, since the 1st of July, we've got the skilled team from Troubled Families that have been transferred over into children's services under the early years unit, and the early help team working around the early help model, which we are emulating from Stockport, will be looking at more locality-based working and ensure that our early help officers are based in our communities across our 5 neighbourhoods. This will help around consistency and end silo working, which will overall help our early help approach and ensure that everything is integrated and aligned to supporting the most vulnerable young people in our borough.
Sorry, I'm going to squeeze 2 more in. Calling Councillor O'Brien to answer question 8 from Councillor Steve Wright relating to land at Gig Lane.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Wright, for your question. The ground at Gig Lane is a privately owned stadium, and the council's role, therefore, as a planning authority, is simply to determine any proposal for planning permission coming forward in a fair-minded and legally allowable way. Any application would obviously have to be dealt with, therefore, on its merits. But the current policy position is that the redevelopment for non-football use, which may be housing, retail, office space, anything non-football related, would have to consider the relocation and delivery of appropriate facilities to an alternative site within the borough. That's what Councillor Jones was alluding to earlier. Furthermore, since the ground is currently designated as an asset of community value, this means that should the site come up for sale, the community group that registered it with the council can have up to 6 months to raise funds and bid for the site. It would also be relevant in any planning application to obviously emphasise the incredibly important community use to which the asset is currently in use for. And obviously that would therefore be for the planning process to determine in its quasi-judicial functions. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Bryan. Councillor Wright, do you have a supplementary? Thank you. And the last question, I call on Councillor O'Brien to answer question 9 from Councillor Morris relating to local government finance. I guess we'll spend the next 3 days talking about this, Eamon, but
exactly.
quick as you can.
I'll be quick. As you can imagine, the council does everything possible it can and takes every opportunity to engage with the government, to submit evidence to the government about our funding situation. It's not just the council working alone. We work across Greater Manchester, we work across the local government association. In fact, at an LGA level, a lot of this work is cross-party, with many Liberals, Conservatives, Labour calling on the government to radically transform its approach to local government, because it is at breaking point, and actually we're united on that in many ways across the local government association. In recent years, we've also been lobbying for a review of how the funding system works under the Fair Funding Review. As of yet, the government hasn't brought forward its proposals, but has been taking evidence for that, and we've been submitting evidence about the need to look not just at deprivation, but as we keep hearing, especially in terms of health and social care, the demographic pressures we face as well, which are separate often to just looking at deprivation. Alongside that, we've been lobbying around the Green Paper and social care as well. Ultimately, though, this isn't just about how you divvy up an ever-decreasing pot of money. This does need radical transformation, and we do need to start looking at putting far more money into it in the first place, and then also looking at how that is distributed. But as I can assure you, we are working in every way possible to make that case to the government. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Morris, do you have a supplementary?
Afraid so, much to everyone's
Thank you.
dismay. I'll keep it brief. I think I submitted the question before the recent spending round, in which obviously there was an announcement about additional funding. Has there been an assessment of the extent to which that funding announced will heal the decade of cuts, or is it quite possibly a pre-election bribe from the Prime Minister who claims he doesn't want an election yet is doing his best to get one? I apologise.
Right.
I mean, who can say what's going on in the mind of Boris? I don't know. I'm not even sure he knows. But in terms of the impact of this review on the council's situation, the reality is there is slightly more money coming to councils, but some of it comes with conditions and some of it can only be spent in certain areas, particularly in social care. And as Councillor Simpson quite rightly pointed out, that a large part of that is reliant on taxpayers having to foot the bill again in a social care precept. And so that again is again pushing the burden onto people rather than the government doing what it should be doing, which is taking a proper view on this. We have made some early assessments, and we still think that there will be need for cuts in next year's budget unless things radically change. We will be in a situation where, simply because of increasing pressures, inflation, pay increases, despite the fact that we've been told austerity is over, it is simply not going to be over. And my suggestion would be that if the Prime Minister is desperate to actually win a vote, he should put this to a vote, because I'm sure it's one that he could actually win, despite himself. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, that does conclude the business. We haven't completed it. There were no other decisions to be made. The rest of the reports were for information. So I just wanted to thank you for tonight. I actually thought, by and large, it was good-natured. By and large, a high level of debate, robust and good. So thank you. Enjoyable evening, but I don't get out a lot. But thank you very much.